What's going on, everybody? It is MadManPlant, and we are back in the podcast studio with a really great episode. I always love doing my podcast, and we've got a whole bunch. So this entire Christmas season, from this Wednesday all the way to January, we got somebody for you each single week. And I love being here in the podcast, and I love smoking weed, and I love having great conversations. And today, we're going to have Chad Westport on, which I'm really excited about. A lot of people know him in the community. He's a really great guy, very down to earth, and really excited about this. Tomorrow morning, I will be in Charlottesville, Virginia on the radio for Coffee Talk. I'm going to be interviewed live on the radio. So if you're in the Charlottesville area, you can hear it in real time. And if you're not, you can see it pre-recorded, which I'm going to be recording from the studio. But we're going to be talking all about transparency, me removing my mask, my 15-state, 12-month tour that I just completed, and cannabis and all the things that I'm doing inside that space, which I'm really excited to talk to higher education again on Coffee Talk. So make sure you tune into that as well. Tonight, I'm actually smoking on the rest of my Creature Panic, which I still have more in my Canitrol, but it's coming to an end as I get ready to harvest my Booty Clapper and my 4x8, which is, I think, going to be my biggest grow yet. All the plants and colas have literally fallen over, and it looks like each time I go into my tent, things are missing, but they're really just laying on top of a trellis net, which reminds me next time I need to do 2 levels of trellising because these really just took the world by storm. But I'm really excited about that. And then we're also about to start our 2025 roadshow coming up as well. So make sure you plan to see us in California for the AAC. We're going to be in Boston and Miami with NECAN. Miami is a new stop for them this year. We're also going to be touring around the Flower Expo, the Hall of Flowers, and a bunch of other great events with our podcast, talking to people about home growing, mental health, and ultimately cannabis, one of the best products and plants on the earth. And when it comes to products, tonight I actually got my dab. I got some dabs left over. This is my hash rosin that I'm going through, and I forget the name of it, but it's on there. But without further ado, I'm going to bring in Mr. Chad Westport. What's going on, my dude?
Oh, man, I'm just having a good day. I'm excited. You mentioned a bunch of things that I love there. Cannabis, mental health, new growers, and seeing the country. So This is going to be a great conversation, man.
Well, thank you for being on. I'm really excited to have you here. You know, you're in California right now, right?
Washington State. So
okay, Washington.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
As far as cannabis goes, it's kind of where we all kind of blend in. Unless you're from Northern California, then you stick out. But
the NorCal crew doesn't really vibe as well.
They're just their own thing.
So you have to get to SoCal to really enjoy cannabis in California.
Well, NorCal's got it going on too.
Well, that's great. So tell me a little bit about what you've been up to. You know, one of our biggest topics are going to be, mental health, home growing, and smoking. You and me come from a great platform where we really are about education, wellness, and really getting the right information to people to make them feel empowered, make them feel good, and then ultimately make them growers. So talk a little bit about what you've been up to lately, and we'll just dive in as I roll a King Palm here.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I've just been working behind the scenes, trying to set up my, 2025. I've been helping growers for a long time, trying to get people started, which, as you mentioned, super important. They got to have a good experience the first time. And good experience can come in a variety of ways. I mean, just the grow itself, and then also, peer feedback, because we all kind of live for peer feedback, and sometimes it's warranted where we may need to improve, but it's all about the delivery. So I just want to keep that in mind for people, because there's a lot of really smart, experienced growers out there that would love to help new growers. Just remember how you approach, how you deliver some of this needed criticism is very important. We want people to have a good experience.
I think that's really important. And we actually pre-talked about that before we just hopped on the episode. I think one of the biggest things is when it comes to gardening, most of this is a skill set that people do not possess right away. And it's a learned behavior, it's a learned science. And I think the biggest thing is how we make people feel. You know, if you have somebody that's in the community that's trying really hard, that's, you know, making some mistakes, or maybe they just don't have it down right, the worst thing you could do is, you know, tell them that they can't do something or that they're not good at it. And I think the biggest thing to realize is we were all once like that. When I first started growing cannabis only 3 years ago, because I've only been around that long, you know, other than that, I used to smoke weed and knew nothing about it. When I first grew my first plant, I was still trying to figure out where all the weed was going to come from. I thought you cut off the leaves and smoked the leaves. That's how ignorant I was to it. And I was looking at it, I'm like, I don't see any weed. And my friend's like, you got to flip it to flower for it to weed, you know, to go into flower. And I'm like, oh, okay. So yeah, no, I agree. And I think too is when we become experienced growers and we kind of got it down to a science or a point where we don't really have to think about it as much anymore, we forget the privilege of knowledge and the understanding and how it works well for us. But that's also because we also started as beginners ourselves.
Terminology is a very important thing, and that's something that as an experienced grower you tend to take for granted, just certain terminology that was going to, you know, go over the head of a new grower. Why? Because why would a person need to know these things? So it's kind of fun as you explore growing. Most people typically enjoy it and they want to do it more and they want to learn more about it. So as you get into it and you learn more about it, you start picking up the terminology, you start learning the words, and it does make communication easier. But as an experienced grower trying to help new growers, we can't take that for granted. And that's something that I always try to, you know, break down with a lot of my videos. I'm a very visual learner. It will take me 3 or 4 times of reading the book before I kind of get it. But if you show me once and I can do it hands-on, I've got it. So people learn differently as well. Yeah.
Talk about some of the learning experiences that you had. So tell me a little bit about you. I unfortunately, and I told you this before we got on, I'm a little bit maybe ignorant to the things that you've done in the past as far as cannabis. But when you started growing, was it growing for yourself just to be weed rich like me? Like I don't sell, I just grow so I never have to pay for weed again. Like I can't stand that. I was used to pay like $1,500 a month in weed. And now that investment has lasted me to a setup that is, you know, continuous on. How did you get into it?
It's something that definitely pays itself back over time. And just if you're growing for yourself, you know, like I've always been a medicinal grower. I have a medicinal license. I grow for myself. I have worked commercially, so I have grown tons of plants for other people. But as far as like my passion, my projects, what I do here, it's just for myself. But getting started is kind of funny. You know, like you, I had no idea as far as like, yeah, you just put it in dirt, you give it some water, and weed grows. So yeah, my first plant that I grew, I didn't know what I was doing. It probably got to only a few nodes tall, a couple leaves. Definitely wasn't getting the right environment, the light, the correct light, or any of that. And then we just killed it. A few years went by. I had a cactus, kept that alive for 2 years, managed to kill it. Yeah, and then finally. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, sponsored for skateboarding, musician. Just I say those two things and Pacific Northwest because we are weed rich here. I never really had to worry about finding cannabis. So I didn't necessarily have to grow it, but I wanted to get into it. I was able to do it. I had my medical cards. I'm like, all right, let's get into it. And I actually started out, I had pretty good beginner's luck. Like my first couple of runs, I didn't do much by design, and I can explain that. But I didn't do much, and I had great harvests. And then about the 3rd or 4th run, I was like, wow, I'm really good at this. I have all this new information that I'm learning. I'm really good. So why don't I throw, you know, a whole bunch of things at these plants, and they'll be, you know, 50% more yield. That's where I went wrong. And that's when the plant humbled me and taught me to slow my roll a little bit, pay attention to the plant and work with it. So Yeah, that's kind of how I got started growing, and then from there, again, just a passion of love. People say cannabis is a gateway drug. I agree because it's a gateway to gardening. I now grow vegetables. I now grow fruits. I grow all kinds of things because of my love for cannabis. So it's led me into many right directions, ironically.
You know, I share that with you. I used to think that gardening was something that when I'm 65 and I own a really nice house and I'm retired, that I'll get out in the backyard and have a little like flower box. But it is a gateway. I can't tell you how many plants that I'm just like, I notice we do the house plants, we do carnivorous plants. I have a orange tree that I got from California from forget the company name, but they ship it to you. It comes about this size. It's a clone of it. And I'm on my 4th year now, and it's just about for the first time ever to make oranges. But I kept it
Wow.
alive. I put it in my grow tent during the winter. I put it outside during the summer. But yeah, no, it is a gateway, and not the sense that you're going to be hooked on meth or anything hardcore, but it's a gateway to really understand the love in nature and the science. And I do agree with you. When you're a new grower, you start to hear about all these different nutrients, all these different type of lights, all these different things that you can do. And I think it's natural to want to go overboard, and you start
Yeah.
throwing everything at the plants. And I will tell you that I think you are right. When you don't know what you're doing, I found myself to be way more successful based off of ignorance and not knowing versus trying to do too much and knowing too much and trying to manipulate or do whatever and then have it backfire. Because I will say, when I was doing organics, I had the easiest time ever. When I switched over to synthetics, there was a slight learning curve. You know,
Mhm.
things don't naturally settle like they do in organics, like pH or ECs or just different things that can self-regulate versus a system that's either salt-based or, you know, whatever it is. And I will tell you that I agree with that. When you get too complicated for the plant, the plant will also not know what to do, it seems like.
Yeah, it'll definitely, it will let you know. And that's the kind of thing about why, it's a gateway to other styles of gardening, because this plant isn't fast. You can't
Mm-mm.
just like repetition. It takes time. So some of these other things that we grow, it's a little bit faster, and we're still learning about watering. We're still learning about nutrition. You could grow cannabis and veggies the same way, whether it's soil, whether it's cocoa, whether it's hydro, DWC. There's so many ways you can do these things. It's all very similar. So it's good that they do kind of relate back to each other, but keeping it simple is definitely the way to go. There's fundamentals, whether it's cannabis or veggies. There's fundamentals that need to be met to have, optimal performance or the best yields that you can possibly get. And those things are all pretty basic. You don't have to get crazy and buy, a bunch of stuff to make them happen. I mean, like watering, feeding, lighting, airflow,
You
getting
know,
those things dialed are they make all the difference in the world.
and you're 100% right. And I think that's what people need to focus on. Just like with dog training, because I have a service animal that she's also been on all 15 states, almost 30 airplanes with me this year with her.
Wow.
And it's one of those things where you're not teaching the animal to work with the human. You are teaching yourself to get on the animal's level and work with the animal. And I think a lot of that translates to the plants. Is these plants have been growing for thousands of years. Your manipulation, I feel like, can also cause disruptions, delays, stunted growth, a lot of different things, all because you're trying to do better for your garden. And that's great, but there is a process where I believe, like you said, where I really don't mess with my plants anymore. I make sure their EC, their pH is stable each day. I make sure the reservoirs are full. I defoliate when necessary. When I'm doing my scrogging, I'm tucking. But other than that, I don't like to mess with the plants. And I think that when you dial in the key elements, and I think too is it's much like photography. So I own a video production company, so I do video and photos for a living. In the photography world, you could have an okay camera body, but a really high end lens and get an amazing picture. But if you were to reverse that and have a really good camera body, but an okay lens, your image quality will actually come down. And I think that's also about this is, I believe that environment is more important than the like the lighting and like what type of lights you use and all the high end thermometers and soil meters and all this other stuff. Where basic necessities for a beginner grower is all you really need. And if you can control the temperature, airflow, and humidity, and have good source of light and make sure that you're on a right schedule, you're gonna have good results, for a beginner.
Absolutely, because those are the core fundamentals of growing. Like getting those things down, taking the time to really learn those is important. I said I kind of started out, I had beginner's luck. The first couple of runs, I didn't even feed my plants. I didn't top them. I didn't do anything. I just wanted to see what the plant would do. I wanted to know how the plant acted. Granted, it's going to be a little bit different by the strain, but just in a general sense, I wanted to see what the plant wants to do. And then I can go in and start controlling things. Or like, I know that in this size of pot, it always seemed to get a little yellow at the 5th week. So if I'm organic, I feed sooner. If I'm synthetic, I'll feed a little closer to that. So observation, and sometimes not even knowing what you're observing, but just being observant is very beneficial, because you'll pick things up as you learn, as you grow. You'll hear something from an experienced grower, you'll read something online, you'll be like, that was the problem. So observation, I think, is important.
Yeah, I talk about that because I have a clone class that we teach in like grow shops, and I've been around different areas of Virginia doing it. And one of the biggest things, and you're 100% right, is eyes. Every day, understanding your garden and what it looks like when it's healthy, what it looks like when the leaves are praying, what it looks like when you're getting a deficiency. Because one thing that I've learned right off the bat is how to spot rust and mites, because I dealt with them so bad last year that my entire last year I did not grow because I could not complete a harvest. Every time I would get to harvest, I would get an outbreak. The outbreak would take over my garden. I just had to chop it down. And for a while, people thought that I couldn't even grow. And it wasn't because I couldn't grow. It's because I couldn't even complete a grow. But one thing that I've learned through the trials and errors, which, nobody wants, but it's such a blessing in disguise, because you start to look at leaves, you start to look at the bud structures, you start to look at everything, and you're like, okay, this is changing, this is good, this is not, this is starting to get a little bit yellow. Okay, this day I went in, I got more yellow leaves, so now I'm looking at a deficiency or a lockout. You can really read it, where a lot of this, I would feel it's muscle memory. You get to a point where you've just seen it so many times. Like, I know right away, if I go into my grow room and my leaves are curled up at the very edges and it looks like there's dandruff and the leaves are really brittle, I better get it out of jeweler's loop, because I might have rusted mites. You know what I mean? Like, I already know that. But beginning, you suffer the consequences because you don't know what you don't know. And I think that's like what you said is that observation, that looking at your plant, really understanding what is it, and is it healthy? Is it not healthy? Because after a while, you don't need any textbooks. You don't need any guides. It's all memory.
It is. And I mean, congratulations. You had one of the harder ones to freaking deal with and eradicate. But so a lot of growing is learning from errors, learning from mistakes. Like, you didn't, obviously go in and put them in there, but you got them. And it takes a while for the signs to appear. But you probably noticed things were maybe a little bit off and you just didn't really know why. You're like, it's different. And then, as you just mentioned, the leaves, there is sometimes telltale signatures that on the leaves you have probably an insect problem, particularly mites. So for anybody out there that has something like this happen, don't beat yourself up, because I guarantee you are going to be paranoid for the next at least 10 years anytime you see something funny on your leaves, because that is how it happens. You get it, you get through it, and then you're just paranoid. But if you learn from it, you don't let it happen again. So you'll probably be good.
Well, yeah, and then also too, you learn. You made a good point. I waited to see what would happen if I didn't feed my plant. A lot of people are under the assumption, especially with clones, seedlings, that they got to remain in a certain time light. If you get a clone, it needs to go immediately into like a canopy lighting. I found that not to be necessarily true, where you can be a little bit more relaxed. Like, for instance, I just put my clones in upstairs that I've had in solo cups since last week. I haven't nuded them. I've only kept the solo cups cocoa wet. I just put them in the system, and they're dark green leaves right now. You know what I mean? There's times and processes for what's happening with the plant, and it also goes to insects too. There are some times where maybe you might have, like, for instance, right now I have fungus gnats real bad. Like, I have a lot of sticky traps all on the floor, right? But fungus gnats aren't nearly as a concern as rusted mites would be. And there are things that you'll learn that you can get away with. Like, everybody's like, oh, when you clone a plant, you should have a heat mat, you should have a light, you should have this. I've literally taken clones, rooted them in root gel, put them in cocoa cubes, and then put them in a Gladware container, close the container, put it at the bottom of the grow tent in a veg setting. And within like 7 to 14 days, a little bit longer, I had roots. This idea of this, it always has to be perfect, and you got to have each number dialed in, or your plant's not going to grow right, or it's not going to germinate. I've let clones go in a bottle of water. Now, it took almost like 20 days to root, but it'll root in a bottle of water without any nutrients. These plants are resilient, and I think that's the biggest thing that my lesson to myself was, don't overthink it. These plants got you. It's a weed. It's not this Japanese rose where in 24 hours it dies if you mess it up,
Yeah. And you have to try one of the things. So audio engineer by trade. That's what I did for a long
very
time. Cool. And one of the best things that my teacher taught me, bless that man. He never had a button like above his belly button ever done. He was a freaking character. He's great. But he said you have to know the rules before you can break the rules. Because once you know the rules, you can then manipulate them to get the results that you want. And that is what really has fueled my passion for learning about cannabis and growing in particular, because there are certain things you can do. Your clones are an excellent example, because for decade I always had my clone domes on, because you're told you need a clone dome. Always had the clone dome on, always had the humidity in there was nice and precipitous, and it worked. So why question it? I bought an Aero cloner, and it didn't come with a dome. I contacted the company. I'm like, where's the dome? And it doesn't need a dome. It doesn't have a dome. I haven't used the dome ever since, and I still have the same great results. So I also I want to say something to that is, anybody who's giving advice, the words "it depends" should be in the answer somewhere, because it depends here for not needing a clone dome. If you're in Washington here, or if you're in Florida, you got great humidity. You don't need to worry about it. But if you were in Colorado, where you get into the teens, you still probably need a clone dome on it. But it's just knowing the rules. My relative humidity is good enough, so I don't need the clone dome. But yeah.
Well, yeah, and also to that, with the Aerodome, because I have the Easy Cloner, I have the AC Infinity germination station. I'm successful in all of them, even with germinating seeds. Same thing that we're talking about with clones. It really goes to seeds too. I've literally put seeds in the dirt in a solo cup and waited. Now, it took a little bit longer because you're not doing the germination method where it has constant contact, so it's breaking the shell a little bit softer in a little bit longer period of time, blah blah blah. But I think that you're 100% on that. You got to know the rules before you break them. You got to know how it works before you know how to manipulate things. And I think that's the biggest thing, is when you're in your garden, to take a clone and do a little science experiment, really learn the plant, because it'll give you more confidence. Because I can't tell you how many times I'll do something, like, for instance, perfect example, right behind me, I got the Hey Abby right there.
Mhm.
and it's bushy ass plant. I don't know if you saw on my face or my Instagram, right? Well, the reservoir is really low, but the plant's needs are still being met. The roots are in the water. It's absorbing that. Yes, should it be up to level? Because it's like this much different, this much root exposed before the water, but
Mhm.
it's perfectly fine, and the plant is perfectly happy. You know what I mean? And you don't know that until you either make a mistake like I did and didn't fill the reservoir or let the reservoir go, or blah blah blah. So yeah, no, I love that because it really shows that it's all about manipulation, and this is a plant that likes to be manipulated. This is a plant where you cut its head off and it's like, okay, well, I'll just grow this.
It definitely does. And experimentation is good because you may find a way that works for you, but there could be something better. So like a piece of advice I always offer, because we're curious, we want to try something new, we hear about things all the time. If you have multiple plants in your garden, maybe try it on one or maybe try it on a couple. Don't go all in on a new technique right away, particularly if you depend on your crop as medicine.
Yes.
Most of the time, things turn out good, but sometimes you may lose a crop. So experiment. It's essential, but do it on one or two plants.
I mean, if you're not killing plants, are you even growing? That's what I used to hear from people. I heard that I saw it on Facebook. It's like, plants live or trees live for hundreds of years, and yet I kill plants daily.
This is true. But I mean, to be technical at the end of it, we kill every single plant we grow.
Well, yeah, and that's the only thing that I wish cannabis was an ever-bearing plant. Oh my God, I love this strain. Guess what? You got it for hundreds of years. Just keep that thing alive.
Yes, well, that's where your cloning technique comes in.
Yeah,
Cloning is the only way to like perpetuate the same genetic. You can have seeds of the same genetic, but that individual plant, you're never going to get 100% back to it.
yeah, and that's why pheno hunting and if you're out there with your medicine, which is not something that I really paid attention to in the beginning, but as you go through different types of plants and you see the characteristic, you really find things that you truly love, whether it's the aroma, the taste, the structure, the build, the way it comes out. And one of the best things to do is to do that, because a lot of times you're going to run into a situation where you don't have enough room anymore, or your friend just gave you a new clone or a new pack of seeds, and that has to go. But if you can keep a small clone around, you could keep cloning that. So even if the plant kept getting bigger, you could still be cutting it down, and there's ways to have longevity. And I think that's why you look at those cuts sometimes and you're like, $5,000 for a plant cut? Like, what are you talking
Yeah.
about? Well, it's like
Yeah.
you just said, you're never going to get it exactly like that. And when you get that, now you have that power. And if that's a breeder's cut, talk about that. I read your bio. You did some stuff with I Love Growing Marijuana and a couple magazines.
Yep.
Is
Yep.
that is
Cut
that based
magazine.
on pheno hunting and genetics? What was that about?
So that was just basically about education and
Oh,
teaching. But I
fantastic.
did with Sensi Seeds. I wrote over close to 100 of their strain descriptions and grow
Hmm.
reports for them. So a lot of it, yes, did kind of tie into that. And I didn't do the growing myself. I worked closely with the growers there to get the information and the pictures that I needed. Everything is, again, this was Sensi Seeds, so it was very official and very proper, is almost clinical how they had it set up. So it was great, easy for me to get. But yeah, so that actually brought a lot of information to me, because sometimes when you're doing strain descriptions, 100 of them, man, you have to be able to describe them different ways. So you look for different nuances. You look for these little things that experience will kind of teach you over time. Um, the more you do something, the more you're able to pick things out. It's kind of crazy. When I started growing, all the cannabis plants looked the same to me. I'd never expected to one day be able to walk in a room and be like, that's your, that's your ghost OG over there. Or like, that's your enter plant name here. Which actually can happen now. You get kind of close to some of the plants. Um, don't quiz me on that, guys, because it's nearly impossible. But you get a lot closer than when you just started and everything was just like, it's just one plant. Yeah, Car. Sorry, I kind of forgot where I was going with that one there. I was like, technicalities. I always come up with the technicalities in my head because, again, there's always those variables, that nuances. There's that it depends. It's like, well, but yeah, I do. I overthink things sometimes.
So when you're writing a cannabis strain description, where do you build the professionalism in that? Like how and what do you bring to the table? Because I think that's really important, because when you're talking about medicine and you're talking about effects and reliefs and that this plant can bring you, it's very important to be able to articulate to somebody, especially if that's why they're getting into cannabis. You don't want them to get into it and be like, well, this didn't work the way I thought it worked. Well, it wasn't because it didn't work. It's because you were doing the wrong type of strain or, type of, I can't even think of the word right now, but how do you do that? Like, is that like writing a song? Because you're a sound engineer. Do you sit there and you smoke and you start just writing out what you think? Right. And then how does that get professionalized?
Yep. It's so there's a lot of things that you can glean from a plant before you get to the effects. The morphology is one, and whether it's going to be short, whether it's going to be tall, that will be important for growers to know if they're in, a small tent or if maybe they're growing outdoors. So the morphology is something that you grow it out, you can kind of see. You grow it out on scale, you can see exactly what it's going to do. So that's something. Another thing is the profile, which is where you have the most fun. That's more the most lyrical part of this, because, how many ways can you say it smells like pine? But there's so many pictures you can paint that you're like, that I remember that feeling, or I've been in that moment. So the profile is important, and that's a place to start, because most like THC rich, THC dominant strains today, everything really out there is going to have an effect. You're going to feel it. So it's really the other important factors to it, like the flavor, like the aroma. So those are something that most people can agree on. Like, it's, it smells like oranges. They're like, it smells kind of like a dirty, dusty basement. But the effects are something, the effects are really the most important. Particularly, again, I approach it from a medicinal aspect. And the effects are hard to give a universal truth because there isn't one. Cannabis, the cannabinoids, and the terpenes, they all work together in our body in the endocannabinoid system. The endocannabinoid system is thought to create homeostasis in the body. There's a lot of other functions that are deeply tied into it. We figured this thing out in the 90s. It's been a major target for pharmaceuticals ever since. So we're definitely onto something, but that's where cannabis, that's where the cannabinoids, the phytocannabinoids react. Me and you, we're all different. So there can be some truth to like, well, it's a very relaxing strain, or, I felt like I was going to run a marathon. There are some universal truths to it, but just going off of strain itself is hard to pinpoint that effect. So another thing that I do like to try to get into these types of reports are the profiles, the cannabinoid ratios and the terpenes and their associated ratios, because that, I think, is where we may be able to clue in or find more of a universal truth for effects. It's like high limonene strains. For most people, that's going to give you like a daytime, more energetic effect. Whereas myrcene is another one that tends to be in a lot more of the sedative strains. And myrcene itself is shown to be sedative. So through those combinations of cannabinoids and terpenes, you can find the universal truths. So when I'm doing a strain description and I'm trying to describe all of this stuff for people, for growers, that morphology is important. For the consumers, the aroma and the flavor is important. And then for that medicinal person, knowing those ratios are going to help you better guess what the effect will be for your body.
Now, with that being said, How do you think people are perceiving that are not in the space of cannabis? Do you think that's becoming more apparent to them to actually pay attention? Because like when I went to National Cannabis Festival, I went around talking to people about cannabis because it was one of my stops, and I would ask the person, "Hey, what are you smoking on?" And they're like, "Oh, some stank." And I'm like, "Okay, well, that's really cool. Like what is it? Like, is it Soulfire? Is it cookies? Is it Jungle Boys? What strain? Oh, I got it from that dude." So then I go over to this dude, and then I'm like, "Hey, dude, everybody says your stuff's awesome. I'm a grower. I'd love to see, what you guys have." And they're like, "Oh, I think it's like blue something or whatever it could be."
Right.
And then I was like, "You don't know?" And he's like, "To be honest, man, we get this shit from Oregon." And I was like, "So you don't know you don't know what you're selling to
Yeah.
people?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "Nah, man, I don't." And he's like, "I'm sorry." And I'm like, all right, cool. So there's a majority of people out there that love cannabis so much that they don't give a fuck where it comes from. As long as it looks like weed, smells like weed, and smells like weed, they're good. I think that is really bad for the community because it annihilates the reasoning for this. It is not recreational. For some people like myself and others, we really rely on this as a way of clarity, as a way of healing, as a way of relief, and I just think that's ignorant. And that's why with you, I want to be on the forefront of education and getting people to realize that they should care about what they're putting in their body. Because one, it's good to know, hey, you're at a party. Did you just smoke something that's going to put you on that couch over there for the next 3 hours? Or did you
Yeah, be
smoke something that's
social.
going to get you, dancing with your friends, but you don't care and you don't know that. So but back to, sorry, I went on a tangent too. I just think it's funny because people are like, "Oh, I love weed," but they know nothing about it. And I guess I was in that sense before 3 years ago because before 3 years ago, I would go to the dispensary, I would be name chasing, percentage chasing. So I
Yep.
had to throw myself kind of under the rug with that as well. But as I've gotten into the cannabis scene, I've learned to appreciate those things because I think in the value of it is when you're looking at growing this like per plant as an individual. So like this plant is going to be specific for this reason. I just feel like that's what adds to the story of why this exists and the reason we should have it versus this is recreational and it serves no medicinal value. So
You got to do it with a passion. And I don't think anybody can prove this, but I think sometimes a lot of us suspect this. Things grown with love taste better or feel better than things that were just angrily grown. So, people with passion, that is important. But it all depends on your relationship with the plant, your relationship with cannabis. And for some people, it is. It's just that purely recreational. It's that, I'm out with the boys, or, it's a Friday night. We're just going to do our thing. And I'd much rather people do that than alcohol.
yo,
But alcohol is an easy example of just that type of consumer. It's like they don't care how beer is made. They don't care what the ingredients were. They don't necessarily care, who made it. Just is it cold and is it getting me messed up? So there's always going to be that segment. But if your relationship is different, the more that you embrace the plant, the more the plant embraces you, the more you're going to want to learn about it. And that's where those things start to come into play. Because, again, I don't always like the alcohol comparison. It's easy for people in their mind, but alcohol is so much different and in
hey,
my
I'm
mind so
drinking
much
wine.
worse than cannabis. Okay, that's fine. But so people will hide people. Some people just want hard alcohol, and that's fine. That's your jam. Some people just want the highest THC they can get. That's fine. That's their consumer. That's their relationship with it. Like, I want to just get smashed. So that's what they gravitate to. But again, you started off this kind of topic with it, education. That's the
Yeah.
most important thing. Is the more people learn, like, oh, terpenes, what are terpenes? Wait a minute. Terpenes are all over in nature. They're in our beauty products too. They're safe. So you start learning about those things, and then that's when your relationship with the plant changes, and hopefully the effects and the things, the way you channel the effects, start to change as well, because that could be a whole other avenue of benefit to this plant, just aside from the physical benefit.
So in the future, so we're with Chad Westport. What is your end game with cannabis? Like, are you working on like more touring and like in person like programs for cannabis? Like, how do you envision your thing? Because one of my biggest things right now is, and we at MJ BizCon, which I really do hope you come. It was a great event. I did a lot of their forums, and I encourage people that actually go to the event to attend the forums, because there's a bunch of free information that people are just leaving on the table, especially dollars, when it comes to really putting yourself out there as a brand and storytelling and authenticity. But one of the biggest things out there is, people like you and I who are focused on providing value, focused on providing education. Sometimes we're looked at as unprofessional or not taken seriously in the cannabis space because of that. And one of the biggest things through my platform is having to fight that stigma, because it is a stigma. I get it that not every person that smokes weed may be an entrepreneur, but there are a bunch of people in cannabis that are high level, and then there's a bunch of people that are, it's all frequency. We're all on a spectrum, so there's no greater, there's no less than. But there's people that want to sit on the beach all day, and there's people that want to be in an office on the 50th floor, which I'm definitely not. I'm in my basement. You know what I mean? So but one of the biggest things is, how have you done that through your education, help provide that professionalism? Because one of my things is, when I'm talking to people, it's usually older people. It's not younger people. These are older gray haired people that are getting into the first time. And guess what? They're the ones that have the money. And when it comes to dispensaries and other places that, promote THC and cannabis, that's a lucrative business by education.
It is. In 2012, I got started again. That's when the medical system in Washington was just about to end. That's when we voted for recreational cannabis. Didn't start for another 2 years, but we voted to legalize it in 2012. But right at that time, shortly before this, I got involved. I started a group called the Seniors MMJ Network.
Oh, fantastic.
And that was just my outreach, because again, that demographic has the most reefer madness stereotypes embedded in their brain, but they're also one of the demographics that could benefit the most from learning more about cannabis. And that's not even saying you have to smoke it. That's not even saying you have to get high. Sometimes these topical creams, some of these CBDs are going to help with various things. So that is where I focused my outreach. Bless the young people, but I don't have the same energy as like that gung-ho, like 21-year-old who's got to try everything brand new and blog about it live. Like, there's a place for everything and everybody, but I don't have the energy to compete. So
yeah,
I just deliver it as me, honestly. Like, I never planned on this being something like I breed, I make strains, and people have enjoyed them. People want to buy them. They're excited about what I'm going to do next. Selfishly though, like, my end goal is to find the perfect strain for my body, for the things that I use cannabis for. That is my end goal, because I know for a fact, when I find that perfect strain for myself, it is going to change the life of at least one other person, if not hundreds of other people. So that, to me, ultimately is the end goal. And I don't know if I'll ever get there. That's another fun thing about cannabis, and another reason why I loved music and studied music, is there really is no end to it. There's always something more to learn. And then once you learn it, you got to like break the rules to get a different result. And then you go down a whole different rabbit hole. But the educational aspect of what I'm doing, it just started. It just is what it is. I would love to turn this into something to where I could, speak at things like MJ BizCon, but the industry itself isn't really worried about the home grower or educating the home grower per se. Like, sure, they'll sell us some products, but we don't buy it in the same capacity as commercial operations do. So I'm not necessarily a high priority. And again, medicinal patients, which is my passion, which is my focus. You mentioned money earlier. Those are typically the people with the least amount of money because they have medical bills. And oftentimes it's just so staggering, it's hard for them to keep up. So I've picked a bad avenue to profit out of it. But again, and I know I have, don't mean to sound egotistical, but I know I have improved the quality of at least one person's life out there. That's fucking priceless, dude.
I'm sure
that's priceless.
And it's
so,
very,
yeah.
Well, and to touch on this, the 3 cardinal rules of success, which I'm going to repeat that I did not create. 1, only walk into rooms where people light up when they see you. Number 2, the fastest way to be where you want to be is slowly. And number 3, the top of one mountain is the bottom of the next. So keep climbing. Yep. And I think that talks a lot about what you just said. And I think also too is I'm a Freemason. So in masonry is like a theater, if you will, and you're the main character. And masonry is not about what you get. It's about the moral application of life. So using the working tools of a master mason, which are like the square, the trowel, the 24-inch gauge, the compass, and how we mold and conform ourselves into better human beings. But one of the biggest things is, I think when you do things from the heart, and when we were MJ BizCon, I sat in 7 seminars that were each an hour long, listening to very important people speak, like Josh, and you should totally be a speaker. They have an application, you just go on, you fill it out, and if they select you, they select you. Also, you should also look at, like what I'm trying to do right now is get into the Nicans, Canicons, Lucky Leaves, because those are all, semi-easy platforms. But the biggest thing that I was talking about was, oh shit! Now I lost my thought. Remind me,
that's you sat through 7 hours of
okay. Now I know where
seminars.
And the biggest thing that they talked about, which you just mentioned, is authenticity. Just being yourself, and whatever it is that you're doing, focus on that. Don't worry about likes, numbers, or anybody. You're not putting up this content because there's a million people watching. You're putting in this content because you believe that it deserves to be out there. And that's the true value of marketing yourself and the true way to get a true following. And yes, like my second cardinal rule, the fastest way is usually slowly, but that's the authentic approach. And that's what I love about when I talk to you, when I talk to Kyle Cushman, when I talk to Raw, with what I'm doing, because my whole goal is to change how I feel on the day that I die, because I'm trying to do what I consider great work, which is impact people's lives. Because as a suicide survivor and as somebody that almost died in a horrific car accident in 2020, the same year I started, 2021, I got in the accident because I was already growing. What do you call it? When I was almost faced with death, I didn't feel that great. And I felt very angry and mad. And one of the things that my grandmother told me was, before she died, was she was at total peace and that no stone was left unturned and that she lived a great life. And to her, it didn't matter if she woke up or not. And I want to be like that. And I think one of the things that I deal with myself is a lot of imposter syndrome and a lot of other things. So one of the ways to make myself feel better is to help others feel better. So if I can help fix other people, I might fix the way I feel inside. So we all have our deep reasons why we're rooted in cannabis, and how we use them. And I think that's the beauty of it. And that's when it becomes real. And that's why when you find that perfect strain for yourself, it's going to be exactly what it needs to be. It's going to change lives, and it's going to be something that you have worked your life for, and that's something that people have to understand is we're building legacies. We're a counterculture. We're on we're breaking stigmas. We're redefining industries. And I will tell you that MJ BizCon is for home growers. This year in particular, they had the Vault, which was all the seed banks put together. They had Equity Row, which was amazing. They had 40 tons, Freedom My Weed Man, Plant Over Pills, all people I interviewed,
Nice.
all set up there talking about freedom and rights and how people are still incarcerated, because even MJ BizCon realizes that the home grower market is huge, and they've done great lengths to get to home growers. They had home grower like little sessions areas and everything like that. Okay. So I do think that yes, you home grower is not going to be buying 10,000 lights for a 1,000 plant grow or whatever it would be, right? We get that. But I do think that, I think companies are leaving money on the table if they don't think about the home grower. And even companies like Twisted Trimmers, one of the people that gave me the batch one, they primarily have huge machines. But even them are focused on a home grower market. And I do agree with you. You said earlier that people may not have the funds, especially in different situations of medical or even just life. Like I said earlier, we're all on the spectrum. But I do think so too, that growing is getting relatively cheaper. A box like this is only like under $1,000, and that's an all-in-one. So the box regulates itself. A 3x3 grow space, somebody could, like an elderly or even a brand new young person could do really good in a 3x3 grow space. You know what I mean? You can do a lot. I think so too. Is we get confused thinking, and that's one thing that I thought, and I wasted a lot of money until I worked with real brands. I was just buying anything off of Amazon, and then I learned about the companies that are actually for growers by growers, and the real value of that. And I realized that before this, people were trying to use their light bulbs in their house,
I started with CFL bulbs and splitters in a closet because grow tents weren't a thing at that time. So yeah, I got some old schoolness in me. Well, but that's maybe where. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you should go ahead. I talked too much. I'm interviewing you.
No, this is. I'm enjoying the conversation because I think we see things very similar. Again, the long play. I always mention the long play, which is a different way of saying what you're talking about, because I have that audio background, audio engineering, but I was also a musician. More specifically, it was just like DJ in the raves. I was in bands for a while, but it's hard to get 4 people as motivated as you. So I'm like, screw this. I'm going to produce. I'm going to be DJ. But I did that for a long time, and over 15 years. So I saw a lot of flash in the pans. People come and people go. It's hard to stay around in something like that for 15 years. But it taught me the importance of, just like you said, I love how you phrased it, though. The fastest way to get somewhere is slowly. So that applies with what I'm doing with cannabis, and it's the authenticity. Yeah, that's it's kind of funny what the industry is saying is we need is authenticity, because industry kind of by nature lacks authenticity.
Yes.
There's an old saying, and I love it. I wish I could tell you the old farmer on the hill that told me, but I forget their name. But he's like, I don't want to do business, or no, I don't want to do weed with a businessman. I want to do business with a weed man. And I'm like, okay, that really does make sense, because a lot of the older legacy people have started to do weed with businessmen, and they've gotten hosed just because that's not their landscape. That's not their territory. Again, like I was an artist for many years. I was also a manager, because the artist does not have the manager's brain. And the manager is usually not the artist. It takes all types of people in that realm and in this industry as well. So being able to mix like really good growers with like a marketing genius, there aren't a ton of them. So trying just to I don't know where I was going with that, other than industry and authenticity. I find it ironic. That's what they say they need, but if you've been doing it for a long time and you have the passion, you're just naturally going to be authentic. You can't fake it.
Well, I think, and so too is like Josh from Raw was speaking, and he was talking about how to build creative brand in the Sicilian market. I think was the name of the thing. And I speak with him each year. I actually interviewed him earlier this year, Most of my interviews, I had a list of actually 40 people I brought with me. I had the whole map planned out because when you get to BizCon, if you don't go, I'm actually going to put together a cheat sheet on how to be successful at BizCon if you're looking to build connections, because it's one of those things where it's like you're like, okay, yeah, I got it planned out. I'm going to go here, here, and here, and then the event happens, and then it's just like all plans just dissipate. You're talking to this person, you're talking to this person, you're over there, you're over there, and you really got to get focused. But I mostly talk to the companies, like some of my sponsors, and the reps, and some of like influencers, like celebrity, like you usually go for Exotic and Soulfire. I was with Soulfire for a good portion, and every time we set up to do our interview, I kept getting more people coming up to his booth, so I didn't want to be rude, so I'd wait, and I was like, dude, I can't wait, I gotta go, and I would come back, and then he'd be busy, so we're gonna do a virtual one. But it was just one of those things where a lot of what I talk about with these people like Dry Flower, Canitrol, which I did their website video because I own a production company, and all these other people, like, yeah, they're big companies, but they see that they're leaving money on the table for the small guy. And they see the passion that we have. And there's a lot of things that the bigger markets use that we could utilize in small form and small batch. And I think what we're seeing is the reason for a call for transparency is the internet is so fast and so vast. If you try to come out with a fake product, we have people that at home can test their own products. They can do all these things. And it's one of those things where it would be very bad and very, I think, in a way, way to shoot yourself in a foot. Like for instance, Imperious Cup or Imperious Expo this year. I was a part of that marketing for last year, and I knew really nothing about the event other than I was promoting it and I was supposed to be there with my booth. The guy got all that money together, then ripped off all those people when you could have just done the right thing and then had a second event. I just had my own event this year, had under 400 people at it, raised $2,600 for breast cancer, which is why the hair is pink. And guess what? I'm having my second annual event next year. But you have all these people that get into these markets to try to fuck people over one time when you can make them a lifetime client and then still get the same money from them. If that's really all you care about is money. I care about people. I care about relationships like you do. Yes, this is a business. Yes, we got to get paid. Yes, it takes money to make money. But at the end of the day, I think with what you see is you're getting into a world where I think people are tired of the fake gimmick. I think it was fun for a while. I think we all wanted to be, in that those reality TV shows like the Jersey Boys or whatever, the dumb shit that people watch. But I think we're realizing that that's not real life, and that's not real products. And when it comes to our skin, our body, our health, that's a lawsuit.
You really do have to be careful when talking about cannabis. I worked retail here as well. And again, having that medicinal background and passion, I wasn't able to talk about it. Like legally, I cannot. I was skirting the line with some people say, but it's very restrictive on how you can talk about cannabis in the recreational structured market. So yeah, that's an interesting one, the language that we use. But I will be going to MJ BizCon next year, and I did watch a lot of your coverage. You talked to a lot of fantastic people, and
I got more interviews coming.
Good. I want your cheat sheet, because in my mind, as I'm watching everything that you do, I'm like, well, that's exactly how I want to approach it. NAM, North American Music Merchants, every January in Anaheim, it's closed to the public, but all the music merchants go to that. It is a massive trade show. It took me 3 years to get to every corner of that place. I would go every year for the audio company I was working with, usually in the booth, but those are great places to network and to do business. Yes, you can hang outside with friends and people that you're just meeting, dare I say the cool kids, and that's fun. And for a lot of people, that is the experience. But for me, like, I want to always progress this. I want to push it forward. So to have the consolidated attention of people That is what I'm looking forward to. So yeah, definitely. Please make that cheat sheet because I'll be using it next
Well,
year.
and that is the sad thing. I'm sitting here and I'm in content creator forums and I'm looking around and I know that there's a handful of creators that are here and I don't see any of them. And that's what I'm talking about too, is not everybody is going to treat this like a business. And not and I want to make this very clear that, see, I've owned my own companies since 2013. So I work for myself. So I make my own money, my own incomes, my own salaries, everything. MadManPlant and my production company are both my two companies. I started with my production company in 2013, MadManPlant in 2020. You have to treat this like a business if you want to do business. You will get railroaded in this industry and people will not pay attention to you. You are a dime a dozen. And I agree with you. Being part of the Cool Kids Club is awesome, but actually living a legacy and seeing the future change and the developments that you have made through your contributions is much, much cooler, in my opinion. Like I said, this is a spectrum. People can live in whatever realm they want. I'm not here to judge or care. My point is, though, when you treat this like a business, you need to look and smell and feel like worthy of an investment. You know, my roadshow was funded by AC Infinity, Hygrozymes, Simple Sullivans, and a little bit from my own production company. Without their monies, and it was not cheap, it would have been very difficult to do all the stops that we did this year. But they're not going to take you seriously if you're just smoking and joking. And I get that. That's the experience, like you mentioned. But the real sense is there's a spectrum of people in cannabis. And like you and I, we have a realm where we have a platform that we want to support by integrity, by morals, by hard work, by ethics, and by putting something out there that people can latch onto and feel that, wow, okay, if I'm going to spend my time watching this person, I'm going to get educated and I'm going to feel better and I'm going to know more. And because I know more, I'm going to become better. And when we can put together a platform, because right now I'm working on my whole EDU course. So I have courses for mental health, entrepreneurship, and then home growing. So that's what I focus on. You know what I mean? And we should do some collab stuff together as well, because we're right aligned. But my biggest thing is take yourself seriously. Take the opportunity to say, you know what? If this is what I want to do and this is how I want to impact people, what does that represent? Because when you look at companies like 40 Tons, that booth isn't cheap. My booth, I didn't have a booth this year, but if I had my 10 by 20 foot booth, it was $16,000.
Yeah, that's a big booth.
Okay. And imagine a 40 by 40 booth, which was what they had, you know, and mine was 16,000. We're probably close to looking to like 50 or 60,000 for that. But, you know, 40 Tons, for those that don't know, they write letters to the prisons to help inmates with weed related charges get set free. And they've done a wonderful job. Corvain Cooper is the owner. I interviewed him. His interview is about to come out, or maybe it has come out on YouTube. I'm not sure. I'll check tonight. But he got the clemency from Donald Trump right as Trump was leaving office in his last hour. And now he has used that platform to help set, I forget how many other people free. And that's the power of taking yourself seriously. He could have said, hey, I'm free, baby. I'm going to the beach. Fuck this shit. Fuck the police, blah, blah, blah. But no, he just said, you know, let me do something better for the community. And you said it earlier in the podcast, which I really love. And I'm not religious, but I do have my own relationship with God. I'm not one of these persons that goes to church every Sunday. But I do believe, just like in the Bible, it says, if you teach a man, or if you show a man how to fish, he'll eat for a day. If you teach a man how to fish, he'll eat for the rest of his life. And I think a lot of times we get so insecure and I have it too. I'll be the first person to put myself under the bus. I'll get in my head about certain people, about certain things. You know, I'll have my thoughts, blah, blah, blah. I'll get in a bad mood. I'll hyper focus on things I shouldn't. And it ruined my own day. But I realized too, though, that me and my therapist always talk about, we're serving two people. We have the person that wants to get better, the one that wants to do more in life. And then we also have the person who's all about regret, all the harm, all the fucked up shit. People did this to me and people did that to me, and I'm suffering because of this, and I can't have this. And I fall in both of these spectrums. But the problem is you can only give your energy to one person at a time. So you have to decide on a daily basis and in real time, who am I giving my energy to? And that's when I say, if you start to feel down about yourself, you start to feel like you're not good enough, go make a post on Instagram, go do something in your garden, go do simple little chores or goals that make you feel something. It's the best way to change the way you feel. I will sit here and I will literally get in my feelings, and then I'll be like, you know what? Fuck that. Let's go make a post on Facebook. We're going to get some likes. We're going to turn the energy back on. We're going to be doing this. And sometimes it takes a minute. But, I'm not perfect either. But that's why, like I have my hat. It says mental health conversations, because it all ties down to the 420, taking that joint, smoking it, breathing in, breathing out, that deep inhale, and just realizing, you know what? I'm good, man. I'm good. It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lifelong journey. It's a lifelong goal. Not everybody gets there. Some people don't even realize it's part of the task. But yeah, changing that mindset, changing your thought patterns, like the whole neuroplasticity, is we have pathways in our brains, certain reactions, certain thing triggers certain emotions because that happened in the past. That pathway has been reinforced. A lot of times, hopefully, we're all able to escape some of these things. Or, let's just use like childhood bully as an example.
Yeah.
The person is now a grown adult. But if somebody says something to them, it can trigger all of that stuff, and you go down that pathway. And I love how you just put that. You can only give attention to one person at a time. And that's something, like, for me, just like with my own mental health, that I've had to do. And it's a long process. It takes years before you start to get good at it, or it starts to become second nature. But you interrupt that negative thought. There's different, reasonings of why it may be valid or invalid. But the kind of point is just to like interrupt that negative thought and try to replace it with something positive. And that is something that I always try to do and try to deliver with my videos, or just like my correspondences with people. Again, you can't fake being happy. I don't suggest anybody fake being happy, because that is going to be a lot worse for you than just being honest and addressing things if you can. But just being happy, being positive, man, it is so contagious. Just a smile, just a kind word. My wife is infamous for just throwing out compliments to anybody.
Yeah.
And she's genuine. And you see just the change in that person's day for one moment. So yeah, being positive and being happy. And we started this entire conversation with, don't judge other growers. This is a great example of like, don't be the negative person, turn it into the positive, help them, teach them how to fish.
Yeah. And one of my biggest philosophies, and I've said it on so many episodes before, is at MadManPlant, my philosophy is, how can you grow a great garden if you can't grow a great human? And all the tools, the money, the energy, the resources necessary to put into that garden to grow a beautiful garden, and then you don't do the same things to yourself. And I think what it represents, and this is what I've talked about so many times, I need to get like a video clip of me saying these things, like
Right.
But the whole philosophy is, gardening cannabis is a great example of instant gratification. Yes, it takes 3, maybe 6 months to grow, but it's a relatively fast pace. You can see change almost on the daily rate with your plants if they're growing really vigorous and fast. And it takes a short amount of time. The problem with your life is to get to the point of harvest where you achieve your goal in life. It may take 3 to 6 years. And that's harder to gauge and to see, well, whether I'm actually doing good things or not, because the garden's easy. The garden's going to tell you if you're fucking up, if it's not being fed, if things are going wrong and everything. And you see that in real time. but in our lives, we don't get to see that. And I think a lot of what we were talking about earlier is you have to be self-serving. You have to do it because you want to do it and you believe in it, and it's what you want. And when you do that, I think a lot of the outside elements where, hey, this person doesn't believe in me, so maybe I'm not doing that great a job, or hey, I'm trying to do this, but this opportunity just blew up in my face and doesn't exist anymore, and now whatever. If your whole reason for whatever it is in your life, garden, your life, your relationships, whatever, if the whole purpose is something that's self-driven and self-serving, you will always find another reason to continue doing what you're doing. And I think going back to our other topic was that eliminates the fly-by-nights. See, you're going to hit adversity at some point in your career, in your life, in your garden, whatever. You probably already have. And unless you truly love and believe what you do, I believe most people will quit once they hit a wall and the whole thing breaks apart. Very few people want to sit there and clean up constant messes and put it back together with duct tape and just keep pushing it forward. But that's the cheat code of life. In the song Billy Joel Vienna, it says, "Slow down, you crazy child. You're so ambitious for a juvenile. If you're so smart, then why are you still so afraid?" And then it says, "Slow down. What's the hurry about? You better cool it off before you burn it out. You only got so many hours in the day." And then it also says, "You know that when the truth is told, you can get what you want, or you can just get old." And the whole song Vienna waits for you is your destiny. It's where you end up, and that waits for you no matter where you are. And I think the whole thing about this is, and where I was going on the rant is, I think resiliency is built when you find true purpose. And I truly believe that, because I once felt lost. I once wondered if I would ever find my place in life. Like a year ago, I would have never dyed my hair pink. But I dyed my hair pink to stand with the women and men of breast cancer, because I raised $2,600 for them at my event. We raised $4,000 in sponsorship. The event was free. The vendors were free. We got $1,200 per person per prizes, 5 categories for the barbecue smoke and smoke off, and had almost 400 people there. My first event, and with my partner, I want to mention him, GI Genetics. It was me and him that put that together, and we rocked it. And now we're about to have our second event this year in October, which you should come to and be a part of. But it's one of those things where, that didn't get to be put together because, I wanted it. That took me 6 months of planning. That took me a lot of time to do that. But you only get one day to celebrate that. And that's the instant gratification. And that's what I was referring to with people, is the fact that you just got to keep going. That's my third cardinal rule. The one mountaintop is the bottom of the next. We have to keep moving, keep like a train, one direction too.
Yeah, you do have to keep moving, and you do, for any content creators that are coming up too, that maybe want to, this is their passion. They want to, do similar things. I'm fortunate enough. I learned a lot from my early days as being a DJ. I gave it away free for a lot, just so I could be down, just so I could be in. And that is a temptation that a lot of people will be faced with. They're like, oh, but as you said, there's 100 people willing to do it for free. Why don't I just do it? If you are dedicated, if you are offering something that is worth value, don't give it away for free.
Yeah.
Have that self-confidence, which is so hard to have, because again, and sometimes, many times they'll go to the person who's going to do it for free, but they're not going to get as good of a job as they would have got if they went with you. And all it takes is one company, one person to see that, to believe in that, and then you're off on your road. So yeah, for people that are, interested in doing something similar, go to an event like this, and don't be afraid to know your value. I can't overstate that enough. And that's why I've been able to do what I'm doing now, is because from DJing from giving it away for free for so long, for like playing for drink tickets. Meanwhile, the promoter's taking in 20,000 that night.
Imagine how that felt.
Yeah, I learned my value. But you know what? I've already been cool once, so I don't need to be cool again.
Well, the thing, and even I speak in front of local schools for video production. They bring me in as an expert for kids that want to get into video production. And our biggest thing is, if somebody offers you exposure, it probably means you're going to work for free. And when you're a student, when you're learning your craft, when you're just new, go get those opportunities. Do what it is. But there's a point, like the other day, a vape company or a dab rig company reached out to me, and they're like, hey, they sent me this like templated message, and they're like, oh, we want to work with you. And I was like, great. Well, email me professionally, your information, and let's set up a call, and let me learn about your product and see if I even like it or I want to try it. And then we can figure out how we're going to work together, which usually involves a rate. And they're like, oh, we'll sign up now, or we're going to only, the first 50 people that get it get 30%. Everybody else will get 25. And I'm like, I don't want your product, dude. I want a relationship like you. I'm a partner looking for partnerships. Like Kevin Hart said, he's like, I'm no longer a comedian. He's like, I'm an investment. I'm a partner. I'm a partner looking for partnerships. One-time opportunities do not benefit me, Yeah. And that's the thing is, like you said, know your worth, but that also has to do with providing value. And that doesn't come from just wanting and looking cool. Buckle down on what you want to do and make it yours. And, try to be original. When I took the mask off, I was like, how am I going to stand out? Because if I have normal hair, then I feel like for me, see, Chad has this awesome
if I cut my hair,
exactly,
if I cut my hair, it's over.
It's iconic. So I was like, I need something like what you got. So I was like, I'll dye the hair pink for breast cancer, and then I'll keep it because it looked good. And I'm like, yeah, let's rock this shit. So, find a way to be different. You don't want to be blended. And you also want to do things that are different. Try doing things that invoke other people or different thoughts or, real methodical type, conversations where somebody can watch this later and say, you know what? I became a better grower, or I became a better marketer, or I became whatever, because I spent 20 minutes and I learned something that I didn't know. And I used that in real life and it worked. There's a difference between using what you see in the world and making it yours versus straight copying somebody. Don't be ashamed to get inspired by others, but make sure it's original, make sure it's authentic. If somebody does something fun, okay, well, do it in a totally different way. So it's truly your idea. You know what I mean? Same concept, but it's different, and we see that with people all the time. But sorry.
You have to embrace yourself. You have to be comfortable with yourself to be able to embrace those things, because again, you can adopt the gimmick and you can stay in character for a while, but if you have that long play in mind, that's going to be wearing on you. And again, there's I mentioned the super excited doing the crazy stuff 21-year-old content creator. I watch it, I love it, no problem with you. I can't do it, but if I ever wanted to compete and I thought that was my route or my gimmick, like I could do that, dude, I would do it for like 4 months and just be like, I quit. I'm not happy. This isn't bringing me joy. Like, why did I ever start this? So do get inspiration from other places, but embrace something special and unique about yourself and then emphasize that.
Yeah, very true. And then also to that is professionalize yourself. Make sure that your name is easy to read in an email. So like if your name is MadManPlant, your email should follow along the lines of MadManPlant. Help it make it easier for the people that are looking for you. Because when we talk about like Google and search engines, they're all looking for consistency. They want to see the same thing across multiple platforms. So when somebody types in something that's similar to you or like about you, it pulls up all these things right away. Like try typing in MadManPlant one time. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about. And then also too, like what you were saying is you don't need to post your life, but post things that are relevant, and I don't always post all the time too. I mostly post about the garden stuff or the podcast because that's really what I have to offer. Other than that, I had to say it, I'm kind of a boring person. I have a family, I have two companies, I work all the time,
Right.
so I'm not really on social media a lot. And if I am, I'm making sure that I'm just on top of it, staying connected when I, can. But I think the biggest thing is like we talked about was the professional image, and I think that'll carry the long way, especially with whatever route that you do go in.
I like to, another thing that I learned at a young age, under promise, over deliver. That's a great
Yeah.
way to, stay in the good graces of people. Because again, you want to, my dad taught me this very early in life, but your word is your bond. Say what you mean and mean what you say. If you say something, do it. If you're not going to do something, don't say it. That is super important, I think, when it comes to building business relationships, particularly in the cannabis industry. I've seen $100,000 deals all the way down to $1,000 deal fall apart for the exact same reason. But people just have unrealistic expectations, or they say they can do all of this, and that, but that's if X, Y, and Z comes through. It's like, just be solid, and be professional. Ganja totin Sheba master is not at Gmail is not the right thing. You have to kind of think about these things. You have to plan for these things. Yes, you can get started and just dive in and do your thing. But at some point, when it comes to professionalism and trying to work with some of these companies that are out there, you have to have that uniformity. You have to have that recognizable logo. You have to have these certain things. So that's again, we're talking. We're not talking plants at all, but that is part of our plant journey. So
Yeah.
sorry to go off on that there.
No, I love it. And it's just more education. And I think when people help understand that, because it's fun to be in this space, but it's also a lot more fun when you can use this space to help your mission or your narrative or whatever it is that you're looking for, So I totally agree. And another thing too is just staying consistent. You don't always have to be posting top content, but just keeping in and engaging. And I found that to work and skyrocket my numbers a lot. So, just being yourself.
On a weird like branding level, and I'll stop talking branding here, but the audio company that I worked for never changed their logo in the 30 years that they had it, and they were very protective of it. If we found a vendor or somebody with their own version of it, we would tell them to change it. If it was not, I forgot what it was, but if it was not 3/4 inches from the text, if text ran too close, we would let people know. And they did so many things that were weird to me at that company that over time, like, they showed me the pathway to so many things of why you do so many things. They spent the decades and the years like experiencing it and playing with it. But yeah, and that's one of the things, again, consistency. Stay a consistent logo, with the exception of you. And I actually kind of wanted to touch on that because
Yeah, go for it.
you're at a really big cusp right now. You did a great job of branding yourself, MadManPlant, with the checker mask. That's how I knew you. I could see that. I could just see you. I didn't have to see any words. I didn't have to see anything else. If I saw that the mask and like the glasses, I'm like, oh, MadManPlant. That is the consistency we're talking about here. But now, again, you've taken the mask off. So bravo to you. But I guess you did just kind of explain the transparency thing is why you did that. But yeah,
I can dive
you're
into
sticking
that.
with it.
Yeah. So, and I appreciate you bringing that up, and thanks for asking me. The biggest thing with the mask was I started growing in 2020, right before it became legal in 2021. For cannabis. I used to grow in my upstairs bedroom, which is my grow studio, which is where the banner is with all the drain pots on the floor and everything, because I'm shutting down the tent. So I won't be growing in this for a while, and I'll just focus on the upstairs because I can only do one at a time. It's way too much. And with that being said, I didn't want to call myself out, but I own a video production company and I wanted to do videos. So I put on the mask. I used to have the voice changer, and I actually was listening to the voice changer the other day, and I was like, I was extreme with the voice changer. But I wore the mask as a way. And when I first wore the mask didn't have holes in it. So half the time when I shot the videos, I could barely see. And I would have to shoot two parts, one with my hands and then one with me talking. And then I found out I could find the mask with the holes. I ran with that mainly because there was three main reasons for the mask. First reason, I didn't want to out myself when it was illegal. Second reason was it's to represent that I'm like non-denominational when it comes to people, race, genders, whatever. I treat everybody the same. And the mask being black and white didn't dictate one or the other. It also dictates that as a Mason, when you go into what's called the Blue Lodge, which every Mason is a part of, that's the main lodge. The checkered floor is black and white. So it also kind of had a little spin in there. And then the third reason was when I was having these mental health conversations, and I really see the growing, and my goal is not to become the best grower in the world. I might enter a couple cups just to do it, but my goal is to better educate people. I think I'm a better teacher than I am a competitor. And I would like to use my platform to really focus on getting people inside the cannabis space. I want to help grow the community, break the stigma. And now I'm trying to get into the journalist media side where I'm actually like a news like station for cannabis. What I want to do is offer non-biased, non-judgmental, and I'm only going to report on facts. And then, so I don't even have an opinion based on my narrative. It's just what I read. Because I want to be able to be the first cannabis, media company for myself. I'm sure that there's others out there that are just focused on what is actually happening versus like the political or the paid advertisement or other stuff like that. And I want to also follow different types of people. And maybe it's controversial. Maybe some people may not like the people I talk to. I'm not in it for that. I'm like I said, we talked about earlier, self-serving. But back to the mask. The third part was when I had these conversations with those people, I didn't want it to be about me. And when I removed myself from the equation by wearing the mask, you can't see my expression, you can't see my face. It's only about those people in front of me. And it got a great way to just have people, because when they talk to me, they can't see my reaction. So like, let's say they're like, yeah, I just did something horrible. And I'm like, oh my God, that's nasty. They can only be like, see me just move back and forth, like no face expressions. So keep talking. I'm not going to interrupt you, but holy God, or like
makes people nervous.
A couple times I didn't mean to, but I dozed off real quick and nobody noticed because, I'm on a, but some interviews are trying. Some interviews like this are just like a full fun conversation the whole way. Sometimes it's like pulling teeth. Like, are we doing an interrogation or interview? I prefer conversation. But
yes.
With that being said, and I've only done like once, so don't think I did it to you. Go back and watch the tape.
I do tend to ramble on for a long time, but no, please continue telling us about your evolution out of the mask.
Sorry about that. But the main thing is with what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to get into more of the advocacy area. I'm also trying to get more into the lobbying because being a home grower is great. But I feel like I have a voice like other people should. And I would like to use that voice in a political stance to really be on the front lines of cannabis and really put myself out there, mind, body, and spirit, and do things that not everybody's doing. Like showing up to like hearings, like trying to like help write letters with 40 tons or spreading the information and doing the real groundwork, because it's one thing for me, and I'm only speaking for myself right now, to grow cannabis. I think that's great, but I'm still trying to do something great in my life. And I don't feel like I've done that yet. And to do something great is something which will be bigger than myself. And like you were talking a little bit earlier about, is you have to build a village. You have to find the right people. Quentin Tarantino has a quote that says, it's not your job as a creator to go out there, create this elaborate plan and do it all by yourself. Your goal is to go out there, find extremely talented people, have them see your good vision, and have them help you carry it out. Very much what you were saying earlier. And I'm trying to build that village of individuals to make a real change, real collaboration, and be as somebody that says, you know what, I wasn't even just a grower, just a smoker. I was on the front lines and I was a part of the industry in some way, bigger than myself. And and for me, I feel then that way I can say that I'm truly understand cannabis culture because I've helped fight for it. I've helped write letters for it. I've gone to hearings for it, and I've also, like I'm sure you have, been stigmatized, throughout my years of smoking. So, it's just for me, it makes me emotional, but I want to just be like a soldier in cannabis and be the reason why one day, like Logan, who's 9, his generation, when he's my age, will have the freedom wherever they are, wherever they lie. They don't have to feel like a criminal. They don't have to worry about going to some drug addiction class because they caught on the side of the road smoking a joint and they lost their kids, like, so sorry, I talk too much.
No, dude, excellent points. It's like I've been around cannabis for over 30 years and I have been stigmatized and it has changed my life. I remember when my buddy Jesse, again, going back 30 years, it was still very illegal everywhere in the US. He got busted with a 10 sack when we were teenagers. He couldn't get a federal loan to go to school because of a cannabis conviction, $10 worth of weed. Prevented this guy basically from going to college because he didn't have money. But that's bad. People are still having their children taken away from them. I get a little resentful every 420 now. It used to be something that I celebrate, but now that it's so mainstream and every news channel has their cute little puns, I like to remind people that people are still having their children taken away from them. You mentioned 40-ton letter writing. Letter writing is huge. One of the best things you could do for people in jail. I do an annual fundraiser. It's through the Let's Be Buds channel, but for the Last Prisoner Project. We raised, I think, $3,600 this year on the show. They have Dutchies match their $3,600, or Dutchies matches whatever we raise every year. It actually put them over like $1 million for their total matching contributions to the Last Prisoner Project. So those are all great things to be a part of. And, we keep saying self-serving because it is, at the core, it is kind of self-serving, but in our self-serving, it's helping and serving others along the way. Like you mentioned, you grow cannabis, you like cannabis, you can grow good cannabis, but that's not your main focus. And that's absolutely fine. There are so many non-plant touching roles in this industry that are just as important as the person who grows cannabis.
Yeah.
We can't get any, nobody's going to hear about that great grower if nobody's reporting on it. So yeah, you found your passion, and I encourage other people to find their passion. Let's just say you're ho-hum on growing, you like cannabis, cool. Plenty of other things to get passionate about that's going to help the bigger picture move forward. So yeah, I applaud you for that. And again, thank you for raising the money, and thank you for writing those letters. Those are
no,
things
don't. I don't want to get it confused. I have not write any letters yet. I've just started the process of all of this. Yeah. So I'm literally just getting into this. I have not done any lobbying, no hearings, no nothing. I'm just starting my passion and journey into all this. So I want to be very clear. Okay. So I don't want to take credit for something and say I've done something that I haven't not. I have not done any of that yet, but that's my goal in 2025 as I go into this. So
you will be there. You will get there. Okay. So this is a preemptive thank you, because these are all things that I've done in the past. Old me would I believe I'd be shirt and tie testifying in front of our legislator here because we're 12 years into legalization and you still can't grow a single plant at home unless you have a very hard to come by medicinal card, which I do.
Your state?
Washington State.
Wow.
You still can't grow a single plant. That is absolute BS. So every year when they bring it to commission, I'll go in and testify again this year. It's always every January. So yeah, I know you're going to do those things. Again, they're on your agenda, they're on your radar. So thank you for even being aware of being able to do something like that. And I'm pretty confident you'll follow through. So thank you for bringing that up to these other people, because those are very important things. Again, the 40 tons and the letter writing campaign, huge. We're talking about, changing your brain thought, redirecting your happiness, your negativity. One letter could, oh my God, just like a smile at a stranger, man. You ever had a shit day and random person holds the door for you, a random person smiles at you, you don't even make eye contact again, and that, dude, your day just got better. So yeah, important things.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the things that you're into. So you have your own genetics, right?
Yes. Yep.
So when you're growing, and what is your style, and like what is your take on like flavors? Like I'm sorry again, I do not know too much about your genetics, but I would love for you to share with us and talk a little bit about you, Chad Westport, and kind of the things that you're bringing to the table and why people should look at your genetics and, you as a grower.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of people have different palates, so I always kind of like to break it down. And I do remember who I heard this from, though, Kevin Jodry. He's great dudes, tons of knowledge, but he said you could pretty much classify all cannabis into fruity, floral, earthy, or gassy. Okay. And when it comes to, like dispensaries or, an extensive strain catalog, you want to try to touch a little bit of everything. Right now, what I've been working with, so the Westport grape juice is kind of like my staple strain. It's something that I typically recommend in the evening time. It's a little bit more sedative, but it keeps you clear and it keeps you functioning, which I like. As far as the profile goes, it's very creamy. It has some grape with a little hint of gas. So it kind of touches on a few different things there, which is, a lot of people want multi notes or complex notes these days versus just like single, just boom, this is what it is. So, and that one is, sometimes people will hear the term commercially viable. There's a lot of tremendous cannabis that's not commercially viable just because it doesn't output, or it takes a whole bunch of like special training or feeding schedules, or it's just different than the bunch. So the Westport grape juice is also commercially viable. It has a great output. And what I personally like to look for, I mentioned morphology earlier, which is just kind of how the plant grows. Because my goal is, or my target, for lack of a better word, are home growers. We're typically growing intense. We don't want super tall plants. We don't want super long flowering plants. So these are all things, terps. These are all things that I look for. And, that profile is so important because a lot of stuff, there's a lot of options. So you have to stand out. And that's how we used to stand out in the day, is you had something different than what everybody else had. And while they could go get the same, same weight, same price, they still came to you because you had something unique and something different. But the Westport grape juice, that is my unique thing. Another one that I work with is the Kool-Aid Man. And I've recently put those two together. That's cool. It was a reversal project. And I put those together, and it's called No Joke. Super trichome. No joke. Yeah, it's no joke, man. No joke. The people that have been growing it agree. No joke. But it's got two main terpene profiles. It has a very red strawberry candy. I heard it described as like a red Gatorade, a fruit punch type of flavor. Super strong in this aroma, and that translates onto the taste. It's kind of one that like coats. That's what tongue. I like. Yeah. Like after you exhale, it's still there. It's still in your saliva.
Yes. And you can go, and it's like right on it. That's the one thing I love about the Tropicana cherry. So the grape juice is your signature. Is that the one that you started with? Is that the one that you pheno hunted the very first time, or how did you get to grape juice to begin with?
So I've had it for about 4 years, and it's special and it's unique. I've been making seeds for over 12 years. there's different levels of it. If we want to get technical, so there's this thing that people will say pollen chucking. It is actually very easy to make seeds. A lot of people do it by accident. So anybody can really make seeds.
Yeah, I've done it a couple times on accident.
Yeah, that's not the hard part. So sometimes that's just like a pollen check, unintentional. Cool, that's fine. That's how we find some stuff. That's how you have new seeds. And then there's breeding with intention. That's breeding. Breeding takes a long time because, again, this plant doesn't grow fast. You have to select for certain traits. You have to grow those out. You then have to like try to cross that back. You have to basically try to reinforce the dominant traits that you want to see. It's easier if you have 100 or 1,000 plants that you can do that with in a big warehouse, but sometimes at the smaller scale, it's a little bit harder. So that's why I'm making seeds at this point, doing it with intent, but compared, again, here I am, I'm overthinking again. It's like, yeah, to many people, I do breed, but then I think of like my influences and the masters who have been doing this for 20 years and have really worked lines. I'm like, I'm not to their level yet. So that's why I hesitate.
Well, that's what I was talking about earlier is we're all on the spectrum, whether like you're a breeder and you're at the lowest level of a breeder and then there's the highest level, it's still a waveform. And that's what I like to think about it is you're still part of the education. You're still putting in the work. You're still coming out with different results and you're a scientist, you know what I mean? And I think that's the thing is whether you're a master breeder and done this for 30 years, like you could put a title on it, but what if the whole 30 years his product was not very good? What would happen? Like dethroned off, like off of his head. How dare you? But no, I think it's cool that you and I have a humble ideology for where we are in this. And I think that's also the value is knowing your place and not trying to rush it. And the slowest way is the fastest way. And like I said, I haven't done any of those things yet. I've only grown weed for the last 3 years and worked with brands on the marketing and content ad space. Other than that, I've never done any big boy stuff in the industry. I want to because I want to say that, I'm part of the industry other than growing. So I think whether you're saying that, you're a breeder with only a certain extent or not, I think your value, what your customers think, the way people think about growing your product, your name is like a name brand like Chanel. People just like MadManPlant. People just know who you are. Anybody knows who Chad Westport is. Before I even figured out who you were, I knew your name and that you were on.
Awesome.
See, people were seeking you out for podcasts. So I think it's less to do about time and place and experience versus what you actually contribute. Maybe you're just some God's gift to seeds and you've been able to save 30 years by doing it in 3 years. Maybe that's just the way it is. We have to accept that. You know what I mean? That's why I think with market and consumers is you want variety. Nobody wants the same government cheese. Like you said, they would still go to the other guy because of that. So the grape juice. Now, do you have like your breeder's cut where you have like that one and then you've made seed packs obviously off of that? How do you do about maintaining the mother plant for such a long time if that's your legacy?
Yeah, I'm able to refresh it. So I'll take clones from the original mom and refresh it and then use those and grow those and keep those. And then I will take more clones off of that. So it's a perpetual thing. It's not one plant that has stayed alive for this long. And that's the way you really, at the scale that I can do things, have to do it. I don't have a big mother room where I could keep them growing into monster bushes. But you keep your plants healthy. And yeah, I did a reversal on it. So you can spray a female plant with a colloidal silver or a silver thiosulfate. Basically, the whole point is, like humans, plants have hormones, and their ethylene is triggering for the female flowers. But if you block the ethylene production, a female will actually produce the male sex organs. So you can pollinate a plant of its own nature. So if I took 5 clones, let's just say 5 clones, I have 4 as receivers and then 1 that I spray to reverse. So they're all actually the same plant, and that's called selfing, or the S1 generation. So I did do a S1 generation of the Westport grape juice. It does not have, I was expecting to get 100% identical to the Westport grape juice, and that's not what I got. The more I learned about it, what I got is kind of typical. You will find the Westport grape juice in there, like an identical to it, in about 1 in 20. But you get the ancestry. You know, I mentioned earlier, you get that kind of that candy, or the wine and the cream on the inhale, and there's that little bit of gas. In the S1 generation, so in the self generation of the Westport grape juice, there is a pheno that is all gas, 1 note, nothing but. And because I take the time to grow them and test them, and I have a group of that one, I used 50 different testers. So I grew over 500 of these plants before I released it to the general public.
Oh, that's awesome.
Which again, that's another way of just staying professional, because it takes, I'm sure you've heard this before, it takes a long time to build a reputation and a short time to ruin it. You could be a master breeder for freaking 15 years, put out one bad batch that throws intersex traits, ruins everybody's tents. Like, you're kind of done for a while. So testing is big, but in the testing, I did find kind of the ancestry, the Westport grape juice, that all gas one. It's easy to identify. Leaves want to grow like this with their fingers out. That's how it grows. All the leaves, every plant, that's how it grows. So you'll know if you have that all gas pheno very early in veg. So if gas isn't your thing, you could chop it. If gas is your thing, you're like, yes. So I did do a self of that, but I am also crossing that with other plants, because it has so many things that I like about it, that it has traits that I want to pass on to other things. But by crossing it to other plants, I'm also able to find what is really showing as dominant and what is maybe recessive about it. And that allows me to work it further, whether I want to take that offspring and bring it back to the original mom to reinforce that, or if I want to go more towards the other parental line on it. So I know I'm getting deep in the woods there on the breeding stuff, but yeah, I am doing a little bit of both. And as far as the breeder cuts, you mentioned NE-Can earlier. I do have a holder out there. That's very important. If I lost this plant, I'd be devastated. So there are a couple holders. One of them is Grow Space Killa. John is his name, but he goes by Grow Space Killa. He's won a number of NE-Cans. Dabadoo is a contest hosted by Mila Jansen, who is known as the Hash Queen. He took second place in that last year. He just took third place in the Palais Polare New York Terp Wars Invitational using the Westport grape juice.
Oh, nice, dude. That's awesome. That's big.
Yeah, so I'm stoked that he is out there. The breeder cut is out there, and it is doing good things. It's doing big things. So
that's awesome, bro.
Yeah, hopefully you'll get, if you do go to NE-Can, let me know, because I will make sure that John, he's a very cool guy. I don't want to volunteer his time here, but I don't think he would mind. But I will get a hold of him and make sure he gives you some of that Westport grape juice. Like,
that's awesome. Yeah,
you'll love it, dude.
Love it. Yeah, try NE-Can Baltimore, because I'll be driving there. I don't really want to fly with a live plant. I don't know if you're allowed to do
that. I've not tried live plants.
I fly with seeds all the time. I literally put them on my carry-on. They don't even give a fuck.
Yeah,
but that would be amazing. That would be a cool to get the original. I might have to save that too and run that definitely a couple of times. That would be amazing.
That would be awesome. But yeah,
so,
if you go out there.
Well, yeah, no, I definitely will be, because NE-Can is part of my tour. That's a great circuit. Nice. And for those that don't know, and you're on the East Coast, NE-Can is an awesome event space, and I really enjoy being there. But so talk a little bit about the new strains that you're working on. So you have the Westport grape juice, and then the other one that you mentioned was.
So the S1 version, I just called it Westport's Posse, because it really is. It's the Westport grape juice. It's all of its, influences. So it's Westport's Posse. Westport's Posse is available. That's on the chadwestport.com. I also have No Joke available up there right now. No Joke is the Westport grape juice times the Kool-Aid Man. Those are the most recent pictures. I've been posting a lot of the growers' pictures up on my Instagram lately. It's great to get feedback from people. They're sending me their pictures. I'm like, heck yeah, I'm going to post them up. So if you want to see what that looks like, check that out. I do also have grow reports for Westport Posse and stuff on my YouTube page. Again, documenting it, transparency, being able to describe the phenos, telling people what they should expect. That's important to me. That's important for any breeder to be doing. You don't see that all the time. But again, professionalism, it takes time to do. But realistic expectations, under promise, over deliver. And then a new one that I'm working on right now that is in the tent, and I've got 5 of my first wave of. Usually I test it myself before like my guys get it, but 5 of my guys got this. We're all growing it at the same time. It's the Westport grape juice, and I crossed it with the blue cheese. Blue cheese is a famous strain known for its like funk. This is not that blue cheese though. It's not funky at all. I was hoping it was when I started it a few years ago, but I grew it enough. I like it enough. I'm like, yes, I want to see what you do with the Westport grape juice. It has a very minty menthol profile to it. I'm like, to the point to where I hadn't had anything that minty before, which is why it stood out. I wanted funky. I wanted blue cheese. And then I had that and I was like, okay, you're staying around. You're not at all what I was looking for, but you're staying around. So that'll probably be the future cross. It takes me about 9 months from when I start my seeds of testing to when it typically actually comes out.
Yeah,
I'll
grow
all
it. Done.
Another round grows it, and then a wide group of testers, again, usually about 50, grow it again. And then once they all get to the 4th week of flowering, I'm like, dude, we're golden. We're good. Roll with it. So yeah.
And then are you like counting like F1, F2s, all that, or how do you do that as far as like the no joke and everything? You know how people are like, so you start with like the S1, and then from S1 you go to F1, and then F2, F3, and I guess it's see I know enough to be deadly, but there's still things I don't know. So this is where you get to educate me and teach me. And this is what's great about the podcast. But what stage do you get to and your personal opinion before you're like, okay, that's good. And now we can mark that off. And now we can have the joy of starting something brand new.
Yeah, I like typically the F3 or the F4 generation, because usually by that point, if you started with a goal and you were selecting for those specific traits, usually by F3, F4, you can get them more universal. Homozygous is the fancy word there. But basically looking the same. Now this is where traditional botany and cannabotany don't necessarily mix, because and again, I do have the sustainable agriculture, small farming systems education as well. So I do like to go with the traditional naming a lot. None of what we are working with in cannabis is like proper true F1s. Because a true proper F1 is something that is stabilized and reliable. If you plant 20 of those seeds, 19.5 of them are going to be the exact same height. They're going to have the exact same morphology. We don't have that because we're over hybridized in cannabis right now. So that's why it's harder to breed. That's why it takes longer to breed in specific directions. But you bring up a perfect and applicable question, because yes, in cannabis, this is how we talk about it. F1 is your first generation. So Westport grape juice, Kool-Aid Man, these are P. These are the parents. They mix. The offspring is F1, the first filial generation. Now, if you took a female and a male from that F1 generation and put those together,
or use
then you're at F2.
And that
then you're at F2.
Or the STS spray, right? So you can get a male or female or self.
Yes.
And then it continues. So then those two. So it's STS or 2 male or female. That's F2, and then the same thing. So male, female, and you're just is that like inbreeding, or how is that going back into itself? How does that build the genetic profile and the strength? Like That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Yep. And so this and this is where, it gets confusing and it gets technical.
Yeah.
Selfing, when you're using the colloidal silver, it's usually like the S1 generation.
Okay.
Male and female, it's usually the F generation. For the filial, you start with the P, you start with the parentals. But working backwards, and why I say it gets complicated too, because then there's the outcross. Like if I reversed my plant onto the Westport grape juice, that's a self-generation. But if that reverse plant hit the Kool-Aid Man, well, that's an outcross. And that's something totally different than an S1. So you can have outcrossing, back crossing, selfing, and then line work. Line work is usually F1 into F2 and then into F3. And what you asked there was like, well, how do you reinforce these traits? How do you, read those back? Usually through back crossing. So Cindy 99 or Cinderella 99,
By
Mr.
Brothers
Soul
Grimm.
from Brothers Grimm is always the easiest example of it. He started with true F1 stock. So he had like the Cindy 99 and he had the true F1. So when he mixed those, it should, it's 25 mom, 25% dad, 50% in the middle. So if you found something on that 25% that you wanted to bring back to one of those parents, you then reinforce those genetics. And every time you do that, you keep stacking the trait or the genetic, the alleles, the genes that you want. And I realize, sorry, I'm getting like technical with this.
No, it's good. Do it. Get as technical as you want, please. Because this is where you can teach me, because it's a different level of gardening, and that's the beauty of this. So please get nerdy with us. I love it.
Okay, so let's say you really like the structure, because this is like the Westport grape juice. I love the structure of it.
Okay.
And like the blue cheese, it was super vigorous. It had similar bud structure, had strong branches, but it grew taller.
Okay.
So when I look at this first round of offspring from that cross, if I want to stay on the shorter side, but I really liked that minty profile, if I found a shorter one that had the minty profile, maybe I would bring that back to the shorter parent to try to reinforce those short genes, because both of those have that dominant short gene. Whether the menthol transfers over into that, next, who knows, but we're trying to back cross with the similar genes. And the Cindy 99 is the example I use, because he basically crossed it back like 3 times. I forget the math, but it was like 50%, 79%, and then like 91% of the, I'm butchering that, I'm sorry. But look up that story of Cinderella 99, Mr. Soul, Brothers Grimm, because it will explain back crossing and how you lock the traits in specifically better than I'm doing now. But to paint that visual picture, it was totally on. Again, I had the short plant, I had the tall plant. I look at the offspring. If what my goal is that short plant in that offspring, I'm not taking the tall plant and crossing it back to the tall plant, because those genes were dominant in both. I'm taking that short plant because it was dominant there, bringing it back to this other short plant, which are hopefully dominant as well. And then that line going forward is going to have a lot more dominant, shorter plants.
Okay, so I'm going to repeat this back to you, and you tell me if I have it down. So this way I can help educate other people on a basic level. So on a basic level, how it works is every time you have 2 parents or use STS spray, and you successfully get to a flower stage, that is an F1, an F2, and F3. So that's the line work that you're talking about. So that's, creating these 2 plants, putting them together. That's the next stage. So now we're at F1, right? And then you would take those and then do it again, and now that's F2. And then you're building it up. So you would build it up to a point where you wanted it. Like, let's say you're like, okay, once we get to F4, we're going to be good. And then now we have these F4 plants. And then I say, hey, I really like this cherry profile. Let's take this and let's mix it with the F4. And then we would do that. And then to back cross it, it would be the same line work, but it's not going up for making the strain. This is to make the combination. So the combination is, again, a line work, but putting them back into each other until you find exactly the outcome that you're looking for.
Absolutely. The
Okay,
the line work is
now
just
I
F1,
understand
F2.
it.
You do, and the back crossing too. It's you keep making future generations, but then you back cross it to the original parent to try to lock it in. And yeah, again, F4 is going to give you less phenotypic variability.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's desirable, because you're easily able to see in the offspring which plant is expressing the traits that you want from it. So yes, you nailed it there. Good job.
That's awesome. So let me ask you a question for people that might be out there that might want to try this, like me. For instance, I wanted to create this strain. Mainly, I'm not doing it for the traditional sense. I just wanted to take something that already had names and good genetics, and just try the process to see to see it happen the first time. But I was going to take the NV Genetics Cherry Avenue, and I was going to take the exotic genetics. Sorry, my dumb cat. I was going to take the exotic genetics Vice City and make Murder Avenue, right? Just because of the name, not because I'm trying to be scientific. But to do that, I would grow both, and I would just try to find the male and the female, and then I would put that together, and that's essentially the F1 of whatever that created.
Yep.
And that's the basic way, if somebody wanted to get into breeding, how they would get into breeding in a very simple, plain text way.
Yep, and the official way is so to understand like dominant and recessive traits and why you would maybe back cross versus line breed. Mendel and the P. That was an experiment like 1856 or something like that, but he is the one who outlined the laws of inheritance, like quite literally the laws of inheritance, is from Mendel. And it was a P that had 7 different characteristics that he was, dominant and recessive. Cross them together. Wow, 3/4 of it has that dominant and 1 of them is recessive. And that's, if somebody wants to learn further on this subject, yeah, start there as far as inheritable traits go. It's Mendel and the P experiment from Gregor Mendel.
I think that's cool that they have these experiments, and I'm definitely going to be looking that up myself because, I think it's cool. Even if you don't wind up breeding, I think it's just cool to have the knowledge of how it's done, because when you go to look at genetics from, like, let's say your lineup, it's going to help somebody appreciate the value of what they're investing in, and then the overall guarantee that the user is going to experience. And when we talk about earlier about like how things can be expensive or they take a lot of time, why would you want to play around with honestly anything more than the genetic? Because my belief, and you can probably back me up, is the genetic is the difference between the bad environment, the okay lighting, the maybe not, not maybe it's in the side of the corner of a room, but if you have a good genetic, you have something that's going to be mold resilient, resistant to different temperatures and, situations. And as a first time grower, that's going to help build your confidence, because sometimes it really could just be the plant. And no matter how good of a life you give it, like I had a bunch of clones, they were doing good. Now, Lacey forgot to water them when I was in Vegas, so that's part of the reason they died. But if maybe they, but I'm not saying about those genetics, because they're my good friend genetics, and I really love them, and they're really great. That was more of a user issue. But the value of it is you could have a plant that could be highly resilient to heat or other things, and that comes through the good genetics, and that little bit more investment can go a long way. And that's why, like my friend GI Genetics, who I'm running his Tropical Trooper, you got your genetics, you got so many other people, and I think that's why it's also important to learn who the person is about. Do they care about science and the actual evolution and the strength and durability of their genetic? Or, because let me ask you a question. This is a great question to ask you. What is your personal opinion on people who come out with lots of seeds all the time that necessarily maybe not are attached to large grow operations, or where you know that they're not doing maybe 500 plants.
Yep.
What do you think about that?
It's typically a red flag to me, and I see this all the time when people come out with very extensive menus frequently. And a lot of times it's everything they had in their garden crossed with the one meal that they had. They just hit everything with it. And in theory, that's actually fine. Where the problem comes with that and where the red flag is risen for me, they're especially in the home environment, they're not testing all of those, and they're not testing all of them for a multitude of things and in a multitude of environments. Testing is so important. I can't express that enough. But when people, again, they've got 20 new crosses every 3 or 4 months. Well, it's like a puppy mill, man. They're just pumping out seeds. They don't really care about you. They don't really care about results. They're just hoping that they put out something that's good enough to have somebody come back, or they sell enough of it to make the money that they need. So yeah, red flag. There's some people who work at scale. There's some people who have been working on projects for a long time that can come out with multiple things per year. Me personally, it's been about one a year.
Okay.
Because I just, again, dude, the fastest way to get somewhere, it takes a long time. Or I know I'm butchering it right now because I get emotional over testing, man. That's the one thing I've actually been attacked on the internet about, was I think it should be tested by numerous people in different environments, because that's the real world application. You mentioned, lighting or humidity. That's called epigenetics. That will influence how a plant grows. That's why we hear so many stories, and I love strain history of cannabis, but we have the Crippy that started down in Florida, and then all of a sudden this guy in LA has this OG. Well, we all think, and now that we've backtracked the stories, they're actually the same freaking plant. But because Florida has this crazy humidity, and he was growing it, with this certain light, and this dude out here was growing it this way, that exact same plant expressed differently. So yeah, there was somebody who was like, I do all the testing in-house. There's no need to have other people do it. I'm like, I beg to differ. And then I caught some crap for it, which was weird. I'm like, that's a shield I'll die on. I think you should properly test your genetics. I'll die on that shield. It's okay.
Well, and it's kind of like with Raw from Josh Kesselman. He has the same energy and passion about testing when it comes to rolling papers and the standards of what should be on the back of it. And on my interview with him, he talks about that. And I think when you do that, transparency is the ultimate key, and as we talked about that earlier, I think so too, is we're in a consumer-based market. As we even talked about in the beginning too, about authenticity. How and why should I do business with you? And when you can answer those type of questions, not only are you going to do better in business, but you're actually going to help people. And like you said, whether you help one person or you help hundreds, and you've already helped hundreds because you've already sold hundreds of seeds, and people have had those, and whether you hear about their success stories or not, you see that, and you see them, and the legacy that's being built. And I think it's because of having that emotion, of feeling that thought, because if not, what do you give a shit? What makes you give a shit? You know what I mean? At the end of the day, it's just a business. You know what I mean? And I think that's the true difference between fly by nights and people that last forever. Like for instance, like Coca-Cola is a great example. So when Coca-Cola first came out, Dr. Pibbleton, who created Coca-Cola, he's a pharmacist, and he left his pharmacy job making good money and left to sell his own carbonated drink that he made for 8 cents a glass container, and he sold usually about 8 a day, and everybody thought he was crazy. And now Coca-Cola is a big company. Well, see what Coca-Cola did to not see, Coca-Cola doesn't sell you a drink. Coca-Cola sells you an experience. See, Coca-Cola is thought to be a summer drink, right? And during winter, a lot of it fell off because people didn't consider Coca-Cola a winter drink. So what did they do? They tied it to the polar bear and Santa Claus, the ultimate icons of winter
Yes.
and Christmas.
Yes.
And now, whenever you do that, you think of Coca-Cola as being part of that experience. And I truly believe when we go to brands and products and services, when you have that authenticity, when you have that transparency, and you are truly selling an experience, not a drink, like Red Bull, they sell
Yeah.
energy and excitement. They don't sell energy drinks. It's all this. It's the bigger picture is what we're looking at, and that's what I was talking about earlier. Is trying to do something bigger than myself. You're not just selling seeds. You're selling that ability. That guy gets home every day from work. He's like me with my clients. I come down wherever my plants are, and I unzip them, and like that little video on Instagram, all the things fade away. And
Yeah.
he's looking at genetics that you hand picked out, that you tested, you did all this integrity for, and you're part of that experience. And it has nothing to do with the bud yet. That's the value that, Chad Westport gets to bring. And that's what you've carved out for yourself. And it's a beautiful thing. And, it's helping people. And whether it's the relief of just working in their garden or actually smoking, the grape juice, the Westport grape juice, or
it's a mouthful.
Sorry, the
No, dude.
Oh man, I'm sorry, I'm butchering your genetics.
No,
joke.
not at all. I don't even write it out on my tags. I write WPG on my tags. I'm like, Westport grape juice is just way too long.
But it's cool because none of this exists without that feeling. And I'm so glad that you shared that, because a lot of times when I talk to people, I'm looking to see if they have like that little story behind of what they do. And I do a lot of testimonials for businesses, corporations. I talk to a lot of their clients. I do a lot of video and media in that sense. And when you talk to a really good company, no matter what testimonial you do, you could literally take scenes from or audio from this and then just Frankenstein that shit, and it would all sound like it came from the same person. And that's what happens when you build those stable genetics and those stable outcomes for people. So you should be really proud of yourself for being so advocate about, or advantageous, or whatever it is, about your role in solidifying transparency in your genetics, just like I am with my messaging. You know what I mean? Because it's going to improve the quality. And then it also, when we look at big corporations, it holds them accountable, because the little guy thinks about this. So if the little guy thinks about this, for people that don't have access to craft breeders, they need to be educated so they can make smart decisions. That's one thing I hate. Is I've been to a lot of dispensaries this year, just like you, because you travel a lot, and when you go in, nobody knows anything. And it's just insane. And you are selling an experience. Sometimes you could be selling to your first customer as a dispensary, and they have nowhere to get passion like you do. So
I loved, honestly, thank you for the kind words. And I loved when those people walked into the dispensary. You knew it, and you knew who was from out of state, because they all come in the first time in the pot store for anybody, particularly if you've been smoking for a long time. It is deer in the headlights. It is like, whoa. And I got to see that time and time again at the dispensary. And then there were the older people that would come in, who I know, like, there was one couple that came in a couple of times. I'm not sure if they ever tried anything, but they made it in that front door, which was a big step. It was hilarious. They were so cute at the end. Instead of telling the whole story, it's like at the very end, like the lady was like, "Well, Ted, you have to go to work now. You better go home and change your clothes. You just smell like the marijuanas." And then they walked out. They were so freaking cute. But yeah, you do get that. You do get that opportunity, and just kind of like back to the testing one more time, and
keep talking about it.
kind of just staying on that, because you mentioned that there's a lot of people out in the industry. There's a lot of people flooding into this space. There is a lot of like fly by nights. Now, fool me once, okay, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. But when it comes to like strain descriptions, that's something that important. If a person has tested or at least grown out their gear, they should be able to give you a description of what it's going to do.
Yeah.
And to further that, anybody can put words on freaking paper. So grow it. And if what they are telling you matches the description they gave you, if you see a description on their website of something else you like, try that, because they've already done you right once. And then if they do you right twice, you can have confidence that they grew it, they knew it, but also what you buy is what you're going to get. Because with this plant, again, that guy or girl, whoever sold you those seeds is long gone with your money by the time you even get close to flowering. So that's the description is another important thing. That's something that I try to pride myself on again. So yeah, thank you for the kind words about the dedication, but it's for patients. It's for medicinal people in my eyes. That's who I aim for, who I try to help, want to help. And I just know that if a person only has 4 plants that they can grow legally, and they grow 4 plants and one of them turns out to have intersex traits and seeded those other ones, that's a very big bummer, and they might not have their medicine. So that's something I take seriously.
Yeah, and you're surprised on how many seeds can come from one plant.
Oh gosh.
Like I accidentally have hermed a couple of plants, and like sometimes it's more seeds than bud. And what is your rule? Like okay, so like let's say like I'm a perfect candidate and I'm in my garden and I'm growing, and there's some seeds that come from my bud, and I actually have one here in my grinder that I'm saving. I have no idea where it's from, but it's been in here with the keef and looks really good. What are the odds that I germinate that seed and something good happens versus a herm plant or some morph genetic like people warn you about?
As I said earlier, it depends should be somewhere in the answer. It depends is in this answer, but I'm going to, and then this sometimes sucks to hear as like breeders, and there's a lot of wonderful breeders doing a lot of wonderful work, creating a lot of wonderful things out there. But in reality, some of the most famous strains, Chem Dog, Sour, OG, all started as bag seed.
Oh, that's cool.
So does bag seed actually have a potential? It can. So this is typically like kind of how I look at it. If you bought like, a quarter ounce or something, and there's 1 or 2 seeds in there, okay, that could be good. But if it's just fully seeded out, that might not be a good thing, because the plant that you grow, every cannabis plant actually has the genetic potential to be intersex. Now, whether those genes are activated, whether that's through stress factor or just natural what it wants to do, that's to be determined. Because a lot of people heard about, like when plants go intersex, you're like, oh, well, the light cycle got interrupted, or, oh, I overfed it, or there's a bunch of stressors that can lead to it. So if you find a bag seed and you grow it, it may be susceptible to certain triggers, but it could also have been a recessive trait from the previous generation. So yeah, if there's only a few seeds in a decent sized quantity and that smoke is just so fire, plant them. Keep an eye on them, but plant them. But if you get something that's just completely seeded out and it was from intersex traits, and I'm like, yeah, I probably would stay away from it.
Okay.
Again, not to overthink it too much. If you have access to other seeds, plant those. If that's all you have, use what you have.
Oh no, I got a lot of seeds, so
okay.
I was just like, I'd be like, oh man, I found something like a diamond in a rough or something.
Chem. I mean, Chem. Everybody knows Chem. Everybody knows Sour. those started as bag seeds.
That's
Make
true.
of it what you will.
I want to take a quick break real quick, and it's just for 2 minutes because I got to run to the restroom. And then, guys, we'll be right back with Chad. Hold on for 1 second. All right, we are back. Sorry about that. Oh, can you hear me?
Oh, yep, I hear you now. Sorry, I was muted there. I always unmute myself. I got a squeaky chair sometimes. Plus, I was, doing the action in the background.
So about maybe 20 minutes ago, 20 minutes ago, we got a question that said, how do you know what's already been crossed in name? So like when you create a strain, is there like a database that you have to go to, or is it like songs where how many people have the song called Save Me?
Good. Excellent example. Nakatomi Plaza is something that I released in 2022. And the dad of that was called Sunday Funday. And there are at least 3 strains out there called Sunday Funday, all of which have different parents. So yes, that does happen. And typically what I did with that one is I just said the cross, it was a mimosa times sour Tangy times sour mimosa. Yeah, Tangy times sour mimosa. This is why we write stuff down too. So Tangy times sour mimosa was the Sunday Funday, but again, there's multiple names. And kind of to, I think it was Nick's point, there's a lot of the name game in cannabis. And we talked about, what people shot by earlier, THC percentage being one of them. We know that labs inflate numbers because that's what sells. A lot of other times what sells is the hottest name. And to a consumer market that isn't aware of what the real thing is or can't discern the difference between the two, you could put any name on a bag really and sell it. And unfortunately, I've seen it happen in the back of the dispensary. They're like, well, this isn't selling. All right, we'll mark it as Blue Dream. Sells fine. So that happens at the retail level, which is again another reason why cannabinoid ratios and terpenes are the good things to look at. Disregard the name, go with the profile of it. And it also is huge when it comes to breeding and when it comes to genetics and when it comes to breeder cuts. People will rename things that are similar enough that most people won't catch it, and they make great money doing it. So what's in a name? To get the proper name, you need to have the right provenance. You need to follow it back to the source. Now, when I talk about chem, there are a million imposter Chem 91s out there, or Chem Ds, or Chem 4s. There's a million imposters. But if I go back to someone like Chem Dog Greg, or if I go back to someone like Skunk VA, those were the people who really popularized and like propagated that plant. So do they have the real one? Yeah, I'm pretty dang sure that they do. Everybody's in agreement. There's like 5 people who hold something like that. Does the guy on Instagram selling like, Chem 91 clones that just started their account actually have the real Chem 91? No, they don't. I very highly doubt that. So what's in a name? Again, provenance. You have to follow it back to the source. That can be tricky to do. Other than that, you're looking at traits. When I get something, when I breed with something, I've had things from European seed banks. They like to do a lot of white labeling. Again, they're going to put whatever name comes up as the top search result that's trending. That's the name of the strain. Doesn't mean I'm going to get something bad just because it's not what it is. I may get something wonderful, but I don't have to go by that name. So you look at the traits of things. You tried to do your homework. Sorry for the long answer, but you tried to do your homework. No,
I love it.
But you could never.
This one is fun.
Yeah, you can never count on the strain name these days. So when it comes to breeding, just look for the traits that you like and then judge off of that. Don't breed with something because it's like Thin Mint cookies. Oh, it's Thin Mint cookies. I'm going to breed with it. I've not even grown it out yet. I don't really know what it does, but I'm going to breed with it because it's Thin Mint cookies. That happens a lot. So yeah, yeah. I mean, to touch on that too, it's like I always say, be very familiar with the plant that you're going to breed with. Don't breed something that's not like a 10 out of the 10, because who wants to waste years of their life on an 8 out of 10? And then also, when you're really familiar with your plant, it makes selecting a lot easier. So I grow something for at least a couple years before I'm like, yeah, okay, I've put you through all the paces that I can, and you're still solid, so I'll work with you. Yeah, sorry. Hopefully, Nick, that answered the question in many different directions. But yeah, it's kind of the name game is real.
Well, we got about 25 minutes left, and I want to kind of open the floor to you. Also, the audience, if you guys are watching, if you have any questions for Mr. Chad, but this is where I kind of let the guests talk about anything that we feel like we didn't cover, or other topics you wanted to go over that are we can learn from, or anything, honestly.
Cool. Well, good. Thank you for the question. Good question. That's always hard. I always do that to my guests when they come on. It's like, is there anything I didn't ask you? I'm like, sometimes the answer is no. This has been a great conversation. We've touched on a lot of important things. But let's just talk about, we could talk about growing, just getting started. Again,
let's do it.
What we like to do.
Yes.
You
go first.
I like to grow in a particular way, but there's many ways to do it. Again, it depends, should always be somewhere in the answer. If you're in New York City in like a 30-floor apartment building in the middle of just like concrete jungle, what are you going to do with your soil after every run? Like, that can be a pain. So that might be a great way to go with a hydroponic grow. So you first because again, you just basically need water for that. You don't have to dump out soil. You don't have to get all of these things. So first, look at where you want to grow. Some places are better than others. Think about your time commitment. Are you a person who's gone 3 days out of the week because you're in a sales position or you drive? What is your time commitment? What can you offer to it? And then you kind of think about these things ahead of time. You basically want to set yourself up for success. If you have experience growing one way or, something else, you stick with it. Or if you want to experiment, you can. I just brought that up because equal opportunity grower here. I don't care how you start. I don't care how you want to do it. Just start, and I'm here to help.
Well, no, and I think you got some great topics, and we have about 25 minutes left to talk about it. One of the things I'd like to educate people to is you got to break it down. And kind of like you were saying is, okay, first of all, let's think of logistically because most time it's either a basement, a house, a closet, whatever. Where is it that you're actually going to grow? That's number one. Number two is the difficulty of the median. Most people, I always recommend, and you probably agree with me, is like a living soil or something that's rich in nutrients, that's sustainable, that can carry its own properties. So if you're not good at watering it, or if you're not good at feeding it, it has some longevity in it, right? So let's say we set them up there. Then you're only going to be able to grow so much in so many pots. So how many plants do you think you need? If you're in a 3x3 space, you know, 3 gallon pots is probably all you're going to be able to fit in there, right? Then it's like, okay, then what are we going to grow in? Do you have room for a tent, or are we going to have to makeshift something?
Yeah.
Then it's okay. How much power of light do we think we're going to need? If we do a 3x3, a 320 watt, light will probably be more than enough. You know what I mean? And then also, how tall are these plants going to be? And I think that's the biggest misconception with people. And I run the gamut too. Is like, that's why when people when I do the trellising and then when I do the final trellis and I go right into flower, people are always like, oh, you should wait 2 weeks. If I wait 2 weeks, they're going to grow through that trellis net, and then I'm not going to have much support. If I flip them now, whatever happens after, I could trellis above, I could do other things. But I think those are the basics of how I would help somebody break it down is, the who, what, where, when, and why. And you got to think about this too. You have to be logical, and you also have to abide by state laws and all these other things. So there's a lot of things to factor into this. So my biggest thing is you should reach out to Chad Westport the next time you think you want to set up your grow, and he would be the perfect candidate to show you where to go and what to go with. And, these are just conversations, but what would you like to add that people, to kind of, drizzle on top what we're talking about with knowledge and setup?
Well, it's important, to think of all of those things and consider all those things, because, like, let's say somebody had a nice big walk-in closet, like, oh, that'd be perfect. Well, how many power outlets do you have in there? That's a place to start. What are you going to do for power? So there's a lot of practical application things that you need to think about. That is one of the things that I've written about extensively for the ILGM on their website, is a lot of these just basic things. There's, as an experienced grower, you just learn by experience. Like, okay, I have a room in the center of my house. That's more preferable to the room with the outside wall that's going to experience more temperature fluctuation. So you can pick there. Garages are a great place to grow. I have built many false walls. Again, pre-grow tent days, man. You had to do some crazy stuff. But garages typically need insulation, so you weigh things. And I guess back to grow tents too. My recommendation now is pretty much always just go with a grow tent in whatever area you think you're gonna grow,
unless you have a room. It's just dedicated to that.
It solves so many problems too. And in a room, if you're not growing a ton of plants, maybe you don't want to or you don't need to. You just have like a 4-plant count limit. Trying to climate control that entire room is going to be more expensive than if you just put a tent in that room. So yeah, there's a lot of little considerations. But if you go to the website and then you click the info tab, you'll see links to the different companies I've written for: ILGM, Sensi Seeds, Skunk Magazine, A Pot for Pot. There's a couple other, but I don't have them linked there. But click on that ILGM link and it will take you to a lot of those beginner question type of scenarios to give you a little bit of a background of these things to consider. Again, if you're growing that hydroponic method and you need to switch out the water every, week or so, where's your nearest faucet? Do you have to carry that water in jugs up a flight of stairs? Well, that's going to be a pain in the butt.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Or you'll be running a Petra Tools HD 5000 with a 100-foot cord, filling the reservoir upstairs on the main level where the sink is, and then running the cord down to the grow tent because there's no basement water source. Yes, I've seen it all.
And if you're doing that, if you haven't flooded your room, you ain't trying. So that's
if you haven't ruined a carpet or gotten shit on there, I do that all the time. And here's the thing too: I had this conception in my mind that I won't make a mess. Like yesterday, I was trying to put the cocoa in the pots in my auto pots, and I'm like, I'm not gonna get any on the drain tray. Like the third to last one, right on there. You know, like you're gonna get dirty. You know, it's not clean. You know, I get my garbage like cleaned all the time, but that's also another thing too. Is with growing, if you're gonna grow in a room, that room needs to be just for growing. Because see, here's the thing, where I believe that I got my my pest was because Honey, my dog, came into my room, they got on the carpets, and then they marched their happy asses to the plant. So your dogs, your animals can be a carrier, and that's why it's good in a sense to not fuck with your plants unless you have to, because you could literally be going in there and just putting the shit right on them. And that's why it's important, like especially during the summer. Like during the winter, I think you have a less chance because everything's like dead. But carrying stuff, and then also, Chad, why don't you agree with me? Outside clones is the easiest way to ruin a healthy garden. Oh man, I got this at an event 2 weeks later. What the fuck is that?
That's to the point that I've taken one clone because it was on the honeymoon and it was my wife's favorite strain, and it was from the proper person for it to be the right strain that they said it was. In 15 years, I've only taken one, just that one. Now, that's because I have a zero tolerance policy. If I never take one in, well, then I very likely reduce my chances of it. But if people do take clones, that's why we talk about quarantine areas, because you get stuff, and sometimes it's not even on the plant. It's in the soil. It's in the medium that comes with the plant. So you want to quarantine things far away from your normal grow. If you ever bring something in, what I would typically do is in that quarantine area, I would let it grow out to where I could take my own clone off of it, put that in my media. You could do a dunk. It's just a pure vegetation at that point. Then it's putting into your own media. So that's something that you could do if you were going to take it in. That's how you run a proper quarantine. That's what I would do. But that's all part of IPM, integrated pest management. Again, that's another mouthful that you guys will hear, and you will see those words in your grow journey. IPM for short. One of the biggest things, so I've worked commercially, and the overwhelming majority of commercial facilities, they spray their pesticides, they do whatever they need to do because you have to stay proactive at that point because the investment is just too big. That's why I'm not necessarily a fan of commercial cannabis, and why I think everybody should grow their own. You control your inputs.
Yes.
But I don't apply any of those things to my plants because of IPM. All starts with cultural practices, things that you can do to eliminate the likelihood of getting a pest. And cultural practices, again, those are things like cleaning your scissors, but you mentioned the dogs, you mentioned going outside, you mentioned summertime. Good cultural practices dictates you do not go and work out in the garden and weed and then come in and play with your plants. Because where are you going to pick those bugs up? Probably in your garden. Maybe when you're walking through the woods. Don't wear the same shoes that you just walked through the field with right into your grow and then start doing things. If you want to take it to a certain level, change your clothes. Some people shower at the commercial facility. We walked in, we went through the Michael Jackson machine where it just blows air at you very heavy from every angle. It was freaking rad. We did that. We changed our clothes. We had booties. We had a lot of things, but cultural
I had a friend that used to wear a full zip-up suit in his house. With the god.
Yeah, I mean, see, that's like extreme, but that isn't wrong. Like that will absolutely help you.
Yeah, that bugs, science says 0 days since bug incident. You know what I mean? Yeah, like there's a number that he's not wanting to add. Like 1 day since bug incident, 2 days since bug accident.
Yes, but yeah, but that is, that's something that we didn't touch on a whole lot, because that's usually when you get into advanced growing. As you're starting out, I mean, again, maybe learn those cultural practices so you're not just bringing things in,
Well, yeah, and I think
but just learn
I
the
think
plant.
a lot of our viewers are mixed. So we have a lot of people in here that are familiar with IPM and stuff. So it's not all just basic beginners, but there's also a sense too that, if anybody is watching, definitely use these opportunities to look up the words and figure out which way you want to go. There's a lot of pest management, and one I've been thinking about is using insects, to combat insects. You can actually get good insects that can go in there, especially when we talk about like rusted mites, broad mites, spider mites, really, but anything, the mites. We have thrips, we have aphids, we have
There's a lot of crap that
there's
can
a lot
mess
of
with
shit
your
that goes,
day. There's a lot of
and
stuff that can mess with
sometimes
your
you'll get
day.
the buffet where you get all three,
Ooh.
and then some. One thing too is, back to our earlier conversation about looking at things, you're going to be able to see the difference that each insect makes. Like, so for instance, like when you have thrips, you're going to start to notice like little like yellow spots on the leaves. And when you look under, you're going to be able to see a couple. So thrips, you can easily see with your eye. You don't need a Jules loop. You know what I mean? But there's certain times where you might think that, okay, maybe I'm in heavy veg and some of the plant is dying off because of natural selection and everything is kind of just doing its thing, and maybe that's not a problem. Anytime I see a brown crispy leaf, I always micro loop it, because that is the first sign that rusted mites are there. Because see, a lot of the bugs, and you'll be able to back me up on this. Some of them are isolators, and what that means is they're going to start on a certain part of the plant that gets the least amount of attention, and they're going to focus on one area. And then once that area is fully destroyed, it'll come out. If you're in a 4x8 and it's fully vegged out in a sea of green, you may not even see it, even if you are moving around, because of all the leaves and all the things. And that's where the confusion is. Oh, is the plant just naturally dying off? Or is this a deficiency? Is this, a lockout? Is this a pest? And I always, as soon as I start to see anything necrosis like, I start examining what it is. Do you do the same?
Absolutely. Like regular scouting is important, but and little telltale signs on the leaves, like a little bit of honeydew, or maybe like a little bit of the shiny spots, or the dead spots, like you're kind of describing. That is kind of the first sign to kind of clue in on. But yeah, scouting regularly helps, but these things are so dang small. Like some of them you can legitimately barely see them with your eye, and only if it's moving. So that's why
Yep.
scopes are good. But we typically don't notice, you won't typically notice something until it's already a problem. So that can be an issue. So you have to have kind of plans to deal with it. It's way easier to deal with bugs in veg than it is in flower. But you mentioned the predator insects. Yeah, there's some generalists, and then there's some specific predator insects that's all they want to do. They're not interested in your plant. There's some that just want to eat aphids. And if you have aphids, it's a great way to kind of combat them. It usually doesn't lead to complete elimination, as in 100%, but it can take something from a problem to something that's like bearable.
Yeah.
So predator insects, beneficial insects, same thing. For organic programs, that's great. And those you can even release like proactively. It's a little bit cruel, because if there's nothing for them to eat, then they just die. But yeah, it's something. It's better than pesticides.
We got a question asking, what do you think about ladybugs?
Ladybugs. Ladybugs are hard to keep around. They'll typically want to fly away. And again, this sucks, because I used them back when I had the HPS, the big lamp with the hooded lamp days. Most of them wind up fried by your light, because that's what they're attracted to. But they do help. They do stick around, but they're less effective than some of the other predator insects, because again, it's hard to get them to stick around.
That's interesting. Okay, because I see ladybugs over Nature's Good Guys. Have you ever heard about them?
I haven't heard of Nature's Good Guys. No.
Okay, so they're a great company. Now, I've never ordered from them, but I know people who have used their products and they say great things. And if you go to their website, they have an insect identifier and they will tell you exactly what insect or mite that they're offering, and it'll tell you exactly what it targets. So, for instance, if you are looking and say, oh my goodness, I have aphids, you can go to Nature's Good Guys and you can look up the exact bug that will go directly after aphids. Now, they do ship right away, and also you have to remember that their lifespan is only for so long. So some people wonder about harvest, and I think this is why I feel like I would do that, like the micro bugs over ladybugs, only because when it comes to harvesting, now I get to get all these goddamn ladybugs out without killing all of them and getting crumbled into the weed and smushed and all this. I don't know. The Nature Good Guys, they'll die way before harvest. And when you do a bud wash, which if you did have insects, you should anyway, it's just for safety. And honestly, if you're constantly touching your plants or, you have heavy fibers, that can also help with a lot of stuff too.
Definitely can. And one thing, because I work with Kiss Organics a lot, we're working on, I've got a custom soil mix right now that works with my genetics. So the whole thought again is like, if you get my genetics and this soil and you follow my SOPs, which are basically lighting, environment, watering, the soil feeds itself. If you're able to follow that, you should really be getting the same results that I'm getting, which again is something I think that's going to be a big benefit to the home grower or the new grower. It's like, hey man, if I could follow these directions and use these tools, this is what I should be looking at. But I mentioned Kiss Organics because they do the beneficial insects as well.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. And they have a lot of good information there too. But the point is, I wanted to mention that because you mentioned they have a limited lifespan. When they ship these things, they ship them in like the tens of thousands. And I'm like, well, Tad, I only need like for a 4x4, I only need it for like 3 or 4 plants. And again, I mean, they're super small, so tens of thousands isn't that big. But I'm like, I just need a little piece. Can you break me off? They have to ship in that large of a quantity to guarantee you get a productive and active amount of insects needed by the time it gets to you. Pretty much every place does. It's going to ship it overnight or it's going to ship it 2-day air at the worst. But he said, there has to be a, certain mass. I forgot what a critical mass of them in there to survive to get to you. So don't be thrown off if all you see, because they're not cheap. Beneficial insects aren't cheap, but they can be a great solution. But yeah, don't hold out for the the half size or the cheaper bag. Just if you need them, get them, use them. That's a long way of saying that.
No, it's kind of funny because when you get them, I had not had Nature's Good Guys, but one of my friends gave me some, and they come in like a little salt shaker, and you shake them on. And the ones I had were like little red tiny dots, and you just see them go. But I guess in a way, if you have like, let's say like you were in a 500 plant, garden, 100,000 of them is probably a good ratio, because think about we're talking about like you can barely see it as is. Like, I mean, it's so tiny, and that has to travel just the length of the leaf. How far it would have to go, that's half of his lifespan just trying to get to the other side of the garden where all the food was. God damn it. It's like somebody stuck in the wilderness. Like, I'm dying out of here. There's food.
Yeah. And so they usually come like in little sachets. That's the best. Just little pouches that you typically will just hang at like on like one of the bottom branches.
That's cool.
Yeah. And those work, like what you have actually does work too. And that's perfectly fine. I typically like the little sachets because that's a little bit more controlled. You could put it specifically on the
like right under the affected area.
Yeah, they're just gonna go for whatever.
I like that part better
is
too.
Ailing them or whatever they're hungry for.
Yeah. All the bad bugs. This is awesome. What are you smoking on right now?
No joke number 1.
Oh shit. And that's the Kool-Aid Man mixture
Yes.
with
Yep.
the Chad Westport grape juice.
Absolutely. 100%. Ding,
I'm
ding,
learning.
ding.
I'm learning.
Hell
I'm
yeah.
learning.
Thank you.
All
I've
right.
got memories sometimes. Oh, but
Oh, I have memory problems too. That's why I have
I
to rewatch
love.
the episode. I'm just kidding.
And
No,
another thing that helps me, oh, I'm sorry, another thing that helps me with breathing, we saw here earlier aromas. I have a very bad sense of smell. Like my sense of smell isn't good. On a scale of 10, I'm probably at like a 3. But I open this jar, I set it in front of me, I smell it already. So when it comes to selecting strains, it helps me. If I smell it, I know it's freaking strong. I know it's good. My wife, she likes pretty much everything I put out. She's like, yeah, it was great. I had a good profile. I'm like, I don't really get anything from it. But the ones that I do, yeah, buddy. Like that's how I know it's an extra winner.
If he can smell it, it's gonna be some good shit, guys.
Yeah, if I smell it, that means you're like smelling it through like a freaking Ziploc bag and a parka on like a 30-degree day.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. You mentioned earlier that it, and which is true, cannabis affects us all differently. Like for instance, like I can smoke, work, do everything, and that for me with ADHD, anxiety, depression, all that jazz. Um, what do you call it? For me, it puts me in the zone, and I can focus, and I feel like I'm more myself. I'm more like just comfortable with being me. Sometimes I overthink too much. It's
Yeah.
my what I'm talking about though it's interesting how it affects us all differently because my wife, she doesn't smoke like that. Like she'll smoke when she goes to bed or when she's just around the house. She doesn't do it. It doesn't help her be productive, right? But it's so funny how the actual cannabinoid receptor and the cannabinoid fit into the brainstem like a perfect puzzle piece, but the results may vary, which is so interesting because without the receptor and the puzzle piece matching, we would never get stoned. And that's like it's incredible because I was watching it on the Discovery Channel on one of the documentaries, and it's the only like receptor and like whatever it's called to watch the documentary again that fits in the brainstem perfectly.
Okay.
Like it was designed to be there. And it's just very interesting how, you know, I don't know. I just think it's interesting how throughout history it's played so much role, but it's caused so much destruction. But then it's caused so much value. Then it's caused so much destruction. And it's caused, you know what I mean? It's just very interesting. It's like this give and take of how we've interacted with a plant.
Yeah. And what we know is actually pretty recent. I mean, in the 1960s, uh, Raphael Mechoulam was the first to like isolate and then describe the THC and the CBD molecule. Earlier in the 40s, somebody discovered CBD, but they hadn't like drawn the cool little picture. So in the 60s, we discovered that. But you have to fast forward all the way to 1988 is when we discovered the CB1 receptor. 1992 is when we discovered the CB2 receptor.
Okay.
And these are natural receptors in our body that these phyto meaning plant, phytocannabinoids dock with. So Raphael Mechoulam, who originally isolated the THC and CBD in the 60s, he's like, well, wait, if we have these receptors in our body is probably making something that also binds with this system. And so in the early 90s, we discovered anandamide, which is AEA. Anandamide was the Sanskrit word for it. I believe it means bliss molecule. And then 2AG. And some people are familiar with the term like runner's high.
Yep.
You know, like
my dad talks about it.
Runner's high is anandamide docking with your endocannabinoid system. And so in the 90s, we discovered really the endocannabinoid system and how it works. And ever since then, we've been fascinated. Big Pharma spends a lot of money exploring it because not only is it like an upregulator, it's a downregulator. It controls so many systems in our body. And Dr. Ethan Russo in 2011, he wrote this paper called Taming THC. And it was all about how, well, it's really where we got the term entourage effect, and now the synergistic effect of how like terpenes and cannabinoids work together in that endocannabinoid system to give us that, high or the effect. Again, going back to why I say cannabinoid ratios and terpenes are important to know more than the name of a strain. But he did that paper in 2011. Oh shoot, I'm squirreling where I was going with that.
No, you're doing so good.
We're talking about how
big
new it
pharma,
was.
yeah, and how we've discovered all the receptors,
Yes.
and there's a lot of research that's being done.
Yeah,
and
I got it back now. So the reason why I went to Dr. Ethan Russo again for that paper, Taming THC, that really started a whole lot of what we know today. But a lot of his big study now, and he's the guy behind like what GW Pharmaceuticals, which is now Jazz Pharma. They're the ones who made Sativex, which is that cannabinoid derived sublingual spray that's FDA approved. That's from cannabis. They've also did the Epidiolex, which is CBD based, which helps kids with Dravet syndrome, the seizures, with Charlotte Figge. Yeah. So he's a pretty smart dude, and he's been working with this plant, but he's on the pharmaceutical team. Anyways, he knows a whole bunch. And the endocannabinoid system, again, creates homeostasis, but there's an endocannabinoid deficiency syndrome. And that's what he's looking at. And that is potentially why cannabis works so well for some people, is because it's just like any other chemical or any other level in your brain and your body. If it's off and you're able to bring it back to normal balance through something else, well, that's great. And that's what cannabis can be doing for a lot of people through the endocannabinoid system. But you can also, throw it off as well. So that's an emerging science, but that really does explain a lot about the interactions of cannabis in the body as an individual. And that Dr. Ethan Russo is the guy to look at.
I wonder if that's why there's so much concern about it. Does it solve problems and create solutions where medicine creates? You see, I feel like in a way, and I'm not like a conspiracy theorist or anything like that, but I do have my thoughts. I've always wondered, right? Like with methadone clinics, and I've talked to a lot of addicts, and I have a lot of respect for them, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but I've always wondered why it's always been an effort to help people still be, deal with their addiction. But when it comes to like cancer, we can't help you, and insurance doesn't cover something like that. And in fact, since you have cancer, you're going to lose your insurance. And when we look at cannabis, how much healing in the real medical space is there that's being ignored and re-acknowledged and placated to something else, all because I feel like in a way, cannabis, and I just feel like cannabis is the future. Whether the world wants to admit it or not, we're dealing with cost inflation. We're dealing with limited resources. We're dealing with global warming. And when you have a literal weed that can make all of these textiles, cannabis can make over 5,000 products, including bricks to make buildings, which are, by the way, fireproof and stronger than concrete and weather resistant and mold resistant. But hey, let's go ahead and, I don't want to get down my line, but I just see the future is, if the world truly opened up and gave cannabis a chance, just like in World War II with Hemp for Victory, I really think we could do a lot of justice. And hemp can create jobs. It can create materials. You're talking, less trees to be cut down. You're talking about more opportunity, and I guess it's just frustrating that we're in this man-made war on drugs because it is man-made, but yet
Profiteering.
I know, but it's just I guess it's just frustrating because it's like there's
Yeah.
so many people on the borderline where cannabis will change their life. And if you stop telling people that it's bad for them, some of the now granted, just like alcohol, which I'm drinking Coca-Cola now. I don't know if you saw me pull my Coke. I only have one glass. I only have one glass, and that's usually, when I feel like it. But you just have so many people on the front line that it just if cannabis could touch them in some way, I just believe that it's going to unleash them, and that's why I'm so happy to talk with you and have you on the show because you're a big advocate, whether it's just the seeds or whether it's your voice getting on stages in the future. We all play a role, and that's why also, as we tie it back to this, we all have to see each other as part of a community because see, the cannabis community is very small. As many people there are smokers, the people that are actually inside the industry and inside the community are a lot different, and that's a small group. And we need to be able to connect to the outside world, and to do that we have to break the stigma, and we have to set the example. And I think that's the biggest misconception is this is not about smoking and joking. On the true side of cannabis activism, I believe, and this is my opinion, so people can feel free to disagree, I don't care, um, is if you really want to say that you're part of a community, find a place, whether it's just being a home grower, whether it's just being the smoker, whether it's just liking cannabis but you don't smoke. It doesn't matter. Just become a part of something bigger. And that's the voice and the mission that one day puts an end to this. Because I really believe that it's like, oh, this causes too much problems. They'll just delay it and they'll worry about bigger issues. But if we come together as one and really put it out there, I think we have a better shot. And that's just my opinion. So feel free to disagree, but you know.
I fully agree with you. I realize that I'm not helping the stereotype with the freaking long hair and literal tie dye.
Why do you? But why do you feel like that? People can say the same thing about it. Well, you have pink hair. Why should we take you seriously?
Absolutely true, dude. And I quit giving a fuck like so many years ago. I always had colored hair as well, but it's like, look,
That's cool.
judge me by my like character, not by your observation. Your
That
quick opinion. And I'm, it's like I'm confident in my character. So
yeah.
like I do that. Like I said, when I testified for the to the legislator about home grow last year, I had a shirt and a tie on. Why? Because that gets more credibility. Unfortunately, we are still there. So when we're public facing and trying to educate, sometimes we do need to clean up a little bit,
Oh, I have
but
no
still
problem
be
putting on a
yourself.
suit.
Yeah, I mean, still be yourself, because that is what we need to break the stigma. You're like, you carry this old lady's groceries in for her, like every week for like 4 years, and all of a sudden she finds out you're a devil worshiping reefer tote. Well, like, but wait a minute, he's such a nice young man. It's just how you carry yourself, how you live your life. Um, that's going to help break the stereotype, because I'm a stoner. I mean, look at me.
That's awesome. Well, to wrap this up, because we're at the 3 hour mark, it's my new
Nice.
goal with podcasts. Thank you, dude, so much again for being on. I've had such a wonderful night, and I think it's
Me
been
too.
such a great conversation. It's been meaningful. And I hope the people that are watching find value, because that's what I'm trying to deliver. I know Chad feels the same way. Before we go, and I make my final remarks, is there anything? Well, one, I want you to shout yourself out so we can all follow you, like you, support you. But is there anything else we should add from your side?
Ooh, this has been a great conversation. Nothing off the top of my head to add, but I know we could easily do a part two another
Oh, we
time, and there
will.
will be more to add to the conversation. But no, I mean, we hit a lot of good stuff tonight. So thank you again. This 3 hours has flown by. It's been very engaging. I love when there's just an open exchange of ideas and thoughts, and it's great to find similarities in our approaches and beliefs as well. So pretty cool. I will shout myself out though, because I'm
Yes,
horrible at the
please.
self-promotion. So I'm glad you asked. Usually I forget these things. ChadWestport.com. That is where you can go and find the gear that I was talking about. You can also click the info tab and find the articles that I have written that will help a new grower get growing on their journey. Chad.Westport on Instagram. That's where you can see some of the pictures of the genetics, kind of stay up to date of the things that I'm going to be doing. And Chad Westport on YouTube. That's where you can find all the educational videos is over there. So, yep. And then speaking of Instagram, it's funny. We are so recent in the demasking of you. I realized that we have two. We had two announcements. I have the still masked announcement for the show.
I know.
Tonight, and then I've got the unmasked announcement for tonight. So I feel kind of honored in that way.
Your legacy. Yep.
Yes.
That no, it's cool. And actually, I believe you're my first podcast without the mask since in here. I believe I don't want to say that wrong. I'm gonna double check my other live feed, but I think you might be my very first podcast or long format podcast without the mask on.
It's gonna be a trivia question one day. Mark my words.
Trivia. Yeah. Well, or maybe I'll make it like the cornucopia and be like, there was never any mask. What are you guys talking about?
Go back and AI your face in now.
Yeah, that would be the whole time. What are you talking about? But no, dude, this was awesome, and I really appreciate it. With that said, we just have a whole lot more with my new face and transparency. My biggest thing is really trying, like I said earlier, to become a value, which I already know I am, but to really see that in the working place of cannabis. I think there's a lot to do, and it's all hands on deck. And whether it's the last prisoner project or 40 tons or Free My Weed Man or Plants Over Pills or all these great companies or 1937 group, we need to remember that the idea that there's all this systemic like hate for each other and all this drama and all this dumb shit. I've experienced it, other people experience it. It's just, there's no point. This is a community that needs to be built, not destroyed. And you do that by your actions. And, you should take a real look at yourself, because I will tell you that I always find more joy in uplifting people than I do destroying people. And I just think that if we focus on the bigger things, the little things become minute, because there's so much more to do, like in the Lion King, than that has ever been done. But no, I just really appreciate everybody tuning in. It's been a great episode. Next week, I have another great person. Sunday, we'll be on for the Sunday, hangout session. Chad, you're always welcome to join our Sunday sessions. Those are just like, I just shoot the shit, and we're about to start my game show again and do some other like cool stuff. Plus, I'm coming up with a new like in-person thing where I was going to do this live, but I'm walking around where I live and trying to do interviews with people in real time. So something like that I was thinking about. But we have the whole 2025 tour coming up, which is going to be really awesome. I'll give you my dates soon. We have the Grow Series studio all ready to go. So that's going to be focused on, and that's the I Love It in Her Eyes, the Mississippi Hippies, which I think will be really good. And then I'm going to be doing some more videos, some more content. I'm myself, like Chad, trying to speak. So if anybody has any speaking gigs, me and Chad are looking for opportunities. Maybe we can speak together. Maybe we can do it. You know what we should do? And I'm going to reach out to you this after is we should do a home growers, like a newbie panel where we'll get like 4 of us, and we'll try to see how many new like growers there are, and just do a Q&A for 3 hours. And it's just Q&A, and we'll try to get as many people to ask questions and be engaged. Maybe do some like giveaways, but we're going to talk about this. Cool. So I definitely want to do more with you, but guys, it's been a wonderful night, and I just really thank you for being a part of this. And there's just so much more to come. Sorry, I'm a little the wine makes me feel good, and then I also been smoking. Like, this is my 4th 1 gram joint. So yeah, I smoke a lot. What? How much was your joint? You got like a half gram
Yeah,
joint? What do you
I've,
do?
I've, I've smoked probably like a half gram this whole time. But again, my CB1 and CB2 receptors are pretty action packed, so they don't need much until they're full.
Oh, dude, I. It's a bad habit, and I'll be talking about it. I actually have a lung condition that has come up that's pretty serious. So I'm actually switch. I don't think it's the cannabis. I think it's due to when I got pneumonia, and
Okay.
it's like bronchitis, but it's slightly
Okay.
different, and it can lead to different things, like worst case cystic fibrosis. So
Okay.
yeah,
Not
and
good.
I also have these nodules in my lungs. So in January I have an endoscopy to go down,
Okay.
because they've been monitoring them through the CT scans and
Right.
the what do I get, ultrasounds. But
Yep.
one of the nodules just became 9 millimeters, and that's the one they were worried about. And they said if it gets any bigger, that they're gonna have to biopsy it. So
Okay.
I'm actually, what I'm going to be doing is Stork and Bickles is going to give me a venti, which they already sent out,
Nice.
and I'm
Nice.
gonna use the venti so I can still enjoy my cannabis, but I also have really bad acid reflux. So
Okay.
I
Yeah.
love cannabis, and I don't think cannabis has caused any of my problems, but I do think the carcinogens and the irritation from the smoke doesn't help exacerbate everything that's
Yeah.
inside.
Yeah.
So therefore, vapor and flavor and really enjoying those terps is going to be the next best advantage. Because I will tell you this: there's a comedian. He said, "I love alcohol so much that I will drink enough to the point where I won't die." But I will do anything to have another glass. He's like, there's nothing like popping open a bottle of wine with a bunch of friends. It was that Jim or that Koresh guy that wears the shirt off, and he's like,
Oh, the machine guy, the
yeah, and
machine,
he's like,
Bert
I would
Kreischer or
always,
something.
yeah, he's like, I will always be healthy enough to drink alcohol. And that's the way I feel about weed. I don't give a fuck, dude. I will always be able to smoke weed. And if I can't smoke anymore, we got gummies. Like, I don't give a fuck. But that's actually
Yeah.
why I'm actually trying to get into the bubble hash, because the bubble hash will be its purest form. It's in vapor. So then there's no combustion of smoke. And then that way I get even better flavor. And, I can just do it healthy, because I don't want to die. You know what I mean? And like I said, I don't.
No. And we'll talk about those terpenes. We'll talk about that flavor another time, because you do want to be careful of that. You do want to be concerned about added terpenes in certain volumes. A lot of limonene is, again, a great example. It's very caustic, but we all know that it's great in the right dosage, and too much, it can be a extreme irritant. So yeah, I always get a little bit scared of isolates. Long COVID, yeah, man. Only use a smoke freezer. Huh. That'd be
Yeah,
cool.
it's actually a really cool device. It freezes the air, and it uses like a
That
computer
sounds
fan and like a
awesome.
freezer. Yeah,
You
no,
just
it's
you just taught me something new. Thank you. I want to
I
Google
don't
that
have
now.
one, but I've seen them and they're cool. So
I'm gonna have to Google that.
well, guys, I will let us go. I'll see you guys on Sunday. Chad, don't log off just yet. I will see you here in a second. Everybody else, have a wonderful night, and we will see you guys real soon.